And welcome to App Growth Summit Seattle 2021. My name is Louis Tange. I'm the Managing Director of App Growth Summit, and going to introduce someone very special. Hold on, I'll be right back. Here he is. There's Palu. Hey Palu. If you saw one of our last two events, you see that he unfortunately had a little eye injury and he wasn't feeling himself. But as you can see right here, eyes all better. Can't keep a good bulldog down, right? Why don't you say hi to everyone? Just kiss him. Okay, let me put him down and I'll be right back. Yeah, so basically it's kind of become a tradition that my dog shows up on stage all the time. If you went to our live event in Seattle in 2019, the last time we were able to go to Seattle, then you saw Palu on stage and at the front registration desk and walking the hallways and everywhere else. So he usually comes to a lot of our events, especially on the West Coast, and obviously he just came here. So he's right here, and we'll bring him out a couple of times throughout the day just to add a little bit more life and cuteness into the event. But we have an amazing show for you. We have 9 awesome sessions by 19 amazing experts. And we're going to kick it right off right now. We're not going to go into any sort of dilly-dallying. Basically, the platform you're in right now, pretty self-explanatory. To my left, your right, to the right of the screen that you're looking at me. Q&A chat. So while the sessions are going on, you can ask your questions and get them answered in real time. And right below me is the Slack style, so to speak, networking chat. You could DM, use emojis, quote reply, all that stuff. Just don't spam the chats or we'll mute you. So there you go. So what we're trying to have here is great, amazing conversations. The way that we arranged this event is so that we have covered the full aspect of anything you could possibly do for mobile app growth. We've got some amazing stuff towards the end. We've got a case study, a master class on how to start any sort of company, especially an app-based company, and grow it all the way to an exit. It's outstanding. Wilson Kriegel is going to give a master class there. We have Duolingo and Craftsman Plus giving you a keynote case study. All these are at the end, because they're a little more robust sessions, and those sessions earlier, like you're about to see, go a little bit faster, but they're still pointed and in depth. They're just a little bit quicker to keep things moving along. So, talking about moving along, let's get started. So right now, Jeff Perkins is going to materialize in this virtual stage. He's going to tell us how not to suck at marketing. Jeff is from Park Mobile. He is the CMO and the head of product over there. So Jeff, let's get App Growth Summit Seattle kicked off great with your awesome presentation.
Hi there, my name is Jeff Perkins. Welcome to the session titled How Not to Suck at Marketing. Before we jump into the content, I'll just give you a little background on me. I am the Chief Marketing and Product Officer at a company called Park Mobile. For those of you not familiar with the Park Mobile app, you should definitely go download it. It helps you park and pay for your parking in cities all over the country. We have about 25 million users of the app, and we're really available anywhere you could be going. Just look for our bright green signs out there with the Park Mobile logo on them. So check out the app. Here's some ways you can get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'll also just plug my book that's coming out in August. The book is the same title as this presentation, How Not to Suck at Marketing. And you can get more information at my website, hownottosuckatmarketing.com. I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm going to talk through today. A couple years ago, I worked at a company called PGI, and I was brought into this company to help rebuild the marketing function. The CEO of the company had decided at one point that marketing just wasn't working, and he had fired the marketing department. And that's what he said, fired the marketing department. So for about 2 years, there was no marketing at this company. And I came in to help rebuild marketing for PGI. And when I showed up, there were a lot of challenges. So the company was called PGI. It had pretty low awareness. And this was the logo. The logo was really, really hard to read. And so that was a problem when nobody knows who you are and your logo is essentially illegible. We didn't just have the PGI logo, though. We had all these other logos. So it was this kind of mess of different brands that kind of all had their own identity and nothing was connecting. If you went to the PGI website at some point, you would see this kind of mess of offerings. Nothing really made a lot of sense visually. It was really unappealing, and it was not optimized for the search engines. So if you went to Google and you typed in online meetings, which was the category we competed in, you would have to get to page 7 before you would learn about PGI and our online meeting solutions. And that was really tough, because if we're not ranking well in the search engines in the natural search, then you have to pay to be on page 1. And we did that. So we bought, all of our Google ads to be on page 1. But even there, we made some real mistakes. So if you were searching for something like, how do I meet Miley Cyrus, you might see an ad for a free tour of our iMeet online meeting tool, which really, I don't think that was really the target audience we were going after. So we were doing a lot of things wrong at PGI. As I took over the marketing team and worked there for a couple of months, I saw a lot of opportunity to get better, but things were taking time and we weren't moving as fast as I thought we should. And at some point I was like, man, I own this mess. I really suck at my job. Look at all the terrible things that are going on here. And that's a bad feeling as a marketer. And so one night I was at home and I was totally bummed out. I was trying to cheer myself up and I turned on Seinfeld. And it was an episode where George is really bummed out about his life and how everything's going wrong. And Jerry looks at him and says, George, if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right. The opposite would have to be right. And from that point on, George goes and he does the opposite of what he normally would have done. And he ends up having really different results to his life because he does that. And so I said, well, we need to do the opposite at PGI. We need to really take a look at everything we're doing and do it a lot differently. And so I started writing down what are the things we have to do the opposite of. And so the first thing we had to do the opposite of was I realized we were taking on way too many projects. There were so many things we had to fix that we weren't being focused on the most important things. So we said, all right, the opposite of taking on too many projects is focusing on fewer things and trying to do them very well. Because the truth that we all have to grapple with as marketers and leaders is that, yes, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. What you choose not to do oftentimes is just as important as you choose what to do. And so we did a simple exercise as a team. We said, all right, let's start to fill in the blanks. We are not growing revenue faster because of blank, or we are losing deals because of blank. And as we kind of did this thing in this exercise, we realized we weren't doing enough to fill in the blanks. It was very clear why we were not growing revenue faster, because we didn't have enough leads. All right, so why are we doing anything at all other than trying to fix that problem? So we had to focus 100% on fixing the blank. And once we did that, we were doing fewer things and we were doing them better. The second thing we looked at that we were taking on these big projects that had really long timelines. So what's the opposite of that? The opposite of doing smaller and more achievable tasks. So rather than going through a big rebranding project or ripping out the old marketing automation tool and putting in the new marketing automation tool, things that could be really important and add a lot of value to the business, but things that also take an incredible amount of time and effort to get done, we said, hey, let's do some smaller things. Let's get some runs on the board. And we developed what we called a quick win strategy. We looked for all of the lowest hanging fruit where we said, hey, our brochures look bad. We could quickly change the brochures. Our online ads need to be refreshed. The hero image on the homepage needs to be improved. These are all things that we can do in a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks and get done. And so what we found is as we did more of those quick wins, people started to look at us different in the organization. They're like, hey, that marketing team, they're getting a lot done. They're really effective. And that gave us the credibility that we needed to take on the bigger projects down the road. So developing a quick win strategy is really important, especially if you're new within an organization. Another area we looked at that we had to do the opposite. Marketing historically at this company had worked in a silo. Marketing did our thing, sales did their thing, product did their thing. And we realized that that wasn't working for us. It didn't work to kind of be the black box of marketing. The opposite was collaborating, and specifically collaborating with sales. Because in a lot of organizations, marketing sits over here and sales sits over here, and you both point the finger, say, that guy doesn't get it. And so we said, hey, we want to enable sales. We want to help sales, but you can't help them unless you get out of your marketing silo and start to work with them. And this is really important because companies that have strong sales and marketing alignment are higher performing companies. Companies with poor alignment are poor performing companies. So that alignment between sales and marketing is critical. Now, at the time at PGI, I actually managed a sales team there, so I couldn't afford to be out of alignment. But what we would do is we would have our marketing leader and our sales leader talk to each other on a daily basis. So if the leads coming in on a given day were bad, the sales leader would tell the marketing leader. If marketing wanted to check how a campaign was working, the marketing leader would call the sales leader. So the result was that we were really optimizing our campaigns in like real time. And so marketing was spending our dollars more effectively, and sales was getting more high quality leads, and both sides were happy, and it was a great relationship between sales and marketing. And as a result, we were a higher performing organization. The next area was around information sharing, specifically with the finance team. So we weren't sharing a lot of information with the finance team. We weren't getting a lot of budget as a result. And so the opposite was being totally transparent. We wanted to be totally transparent with our finance partners. The reality in most organizations is that the finance team thinks marketing basically takes corporate money and throws it in the fireplace. They have no idea what marketing is doing with the dollars that they're getting. And if you've ever been in an organization where you've said these things to a CEO, you're going to be in a bad place. Never say to a CEO, you have to spend money to make money, or there's no way to track ROI on that investment at all. Those are not things a CEO will understand. What you have to do as a marketer, is help the finance team understand the value of what you're doing on the business. And the more we did this with our finance team, the more they started to get it. And they could see, oh, the dollars we're giving marketing are driving leads that are helping our sales team. And what happened was, as they saw that our results were improving, they started giving us more money to spend. And that's the best place to be with your finance team, having more money because they see clearly that marketing is driving results from the business. The next area was around the team. So when I started, we had some players in place. They weren't quite the right team. And so we needed to make some changes. And so the opposite was building the right team for the business. The truth is, in marketing, you have all of these tools out there, all of these marketing automation tools. But the truth is, you can't automate marketing. It takes people to really make the marketing program work. You have to have the right people in the right positions. And that's what the focus was. So we had to get rid of some of the people who were not performing and bring in a whole new team of high performers. This was our team at PGI. This was one of the best teams I've had the opportunity to build. And what I learned after we got the right people in the right positions is that when you have the right team in place, there's really nothing you can't achieve as an organization. And so those are the 5 areas of things where we did the opposite. And so I'm sure you're thinking, Jeff, okay, what was the impact? Well, we actually really started to move the needle in the business. Here's the website was much improved and actually ranked in the search engines, which was really good. All of our KPIs improved, our leads, our cost per lead, and most importantly for the business, revenue. Here's a quick chart that shows the revenue growth from the time we kind of started doing the opposite to before I left the company 3 years later. And most importantly for me, we actually made the logo legible, which was a big win for me and for the PGI team. So those are my 5 tips on how not to suck at marketing. Focus, get those quick wins, build that relationship with the sales team, be transparent with your finance partners, and build the right team for the business that you're working on. And if what you're doing today is not working, take it from me, you want to do the opposite. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Download the Park Mobile app and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks, Jeff. That was awesome. If you want to talk more with Jeff, you can go down to the speaker green room below. If you look below me in the networking chat, you'll see one of the channels is Speaker Green Room. That's where Jeff will be continuing the conversation and where all of our speakers will be after the sessions here in this virtual stage environment. They're going to go right down below so you can talk to them there. Now, moving on, we have our next presentation. This is going to be from one of our sponsors. And by the way, there are no pitches at all at App Growth Summit. Just like there's no spamming in the chats, there's no pitches on this virtual stage. AppsFlyer is about to give a great presentation, but since we're talking about a sponsor, I want to shout out the other sponsors that are amazing. Addictive is also here. They're also great. And so is YouAppy. So thank you very much to our sponsors for this event. Without them, we'd be doing this alone. But we'd be with you, so we're not really alone. Okay, so let's get on with John. John Lopez is going to talk about how it's a marathon, not a sprint, and he's going to give us some insights from the first month of post-ATT release. So, John, the virtual stage is yours. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John Lopez, a solutions architect at AppsFlyer and the iOS 14 product specialist for North America. In today's talk, we're going to take a closer look at the first month post iOS 14.5 public release, how the industry has fared, and what we can expect in the months to come. First of all, iOS 14.5 is finally here. I think we can all take a collective sigh of relief that the promises that Apple made back in June of last year have all come to fruition. 7 months later than planned, but the entire industry didn't implode and we're moving forward. Many of the biggest brands that we're all familiar with if you have an iPhone have adopted the App Tracking Transparency Framework. Many of you have now likely encountered ATT pop-ups from Facebook, Instagram, ESPN, and even Nike. Certain brands, such as Nike, have invested a great deal of effort in creating a native pre-prompt to connect users and make the transition into this new privacy-centric era much smoother. But beyond that tiny world that is our own iPhones, I want us to take a look at what's happening at a larger scale in the industry. In the rest of the presentation, we're actually going to talk about what's happening with ATT implementation. What do opt-in rates look like on a global scale, and specifically within the US? This data set is built upon the ATT framework, install, and opt-in and opt-out data from the thousands of AppsFlyer customers that have implemented the prompt. And with over 65% of the app economy market share in the world across all verticals and regions, these data points are a very solid sample on what's happening at the industry at large. We're sharing this data with the industry on a weekly basis. It'll be updated every Tuesday. We're closely following the trends surrounding iOS 14 and ATT adoption. I'll share a link to this dashboard that we're making public at the very end of this presentation. As of May 23rd, nearly 1,600 apps have implemented the App Tracking Transparency Framework. And over the course of the week of May 23rd, users have opted to allow tracking, meaning they've accepted the prompt, 78 million times. That being said, there's not been a mad rush to adopt iOS 14.5, not on the app developer side and not on the user side. Currently, only 18% of apps globally have implemented app tracking transparency. We set the threshold for our data set at 10,000 installs since mid-March to make sure we're capturing data from high traffic and well-established apps. What's more, users haven't been rushing to adopt either. As of May 23rd, only 16% of users globally installing apps were on iOS 14.5. Both of these stats have been increasing at about 1 percentage point per week in the past few weeks, so we're witnessing a very slow adoption indeed. That being said, from what we've noticed, as of June 3rd to June 4th, Apple forced an auto update to all users to 14.6. So we expect an inflection point to be coming very soon. While the industry's been pretty slow to move forward into Apple's new privacy-centric reality, Apple has taken its position very seriously and made it very clear. Apple's not only educating users about this, they're actively encouraging them to opt out. They've done this through a series of commercials and advertisements. And just last week, they released yet another video reminding users to be very careful about choosing who tracks their information and how to address the prompt. Despite Apple's best efforts, we're still seeing pretty remarkably high opt-in rates in the 4th week of ATT rollout. Globally, we've seen an average opt-in rate of about 40% for active users and 35% among installers. An active user is an app user who's completed at least one in-app event, such as a purchase, whereas a new installer is a fresh install. Now to zoom in on the United States, which is one of Apple's largest markets worldwide, opt-in rates are somewhat lower, yet still fairly high compared to bearish estimates of last year. We're seeing a 30% opt-in rate among active users and about 29% among installers. There are many debates on the reasoning behind these opt-in rates. We believe it's still quite early in the game to reach a decisive conclusion. There's a lot of discussion surrounding the timing of the prompt, whether or not a native prompt shown in advance increases adoption rates, and how much effort should advertisers put into the content of that pop-up itself. What we do know for a fact, however, is that the vertical that your app is in plays a very significant role in the likelihood of opting in. Let's take a look at two very prominent categories, shopping and gaming. Shopping apps, by design, typically have a much higher user familiarity with the brand, a higher degree of user commitment, and people are more willing to invest in that brand. It's not surprising that we're seeing a much higher opt-in rate than average at 35% for this category. This is the highest rate among all categories. And because of this, we're actually seeing that advertisers for shopping apps are continuing to invest and increasing their ad spend on iOS since the ATT rollout. Conversely, gaming apps have a significantly lower opt-in rate. The overall opt-in rate for gaming apps in the US stands at 29%. This is below the cross-category average. For the most part, users of gaming apps, especially in casual and hyper-casual games, are less committed to the brand and unwilling to make compromises such as sharing their IDFA. We're seeing that active users of the games are much more willing to accept the opt-in, whereas new installers are not as frequent to do so. It's been a month since the iOS 14.5 rollout. We're also observing and learning and keeping a close eye on user behavior and trends. I think it's hard to say what will come in the next couple months as iOS 14.5 and 0.6 adoption increases. We'll probably likely see shifts that align with our early observations, but we're going to keep a close eye on it. What I implore you all to do after this presentation is to go ahead and head over to the AppsFlyer iOS 14 ATT dashboard. Here, you'll see lots of stats around adoption, implementation, and opt-in rates. Here's an example of the finance category where you can explore different regions or globally and look at weekly trends as well as various KPIs around opt-in. As I said previously, we're updating the data frequently every Tuesday morning with new insights each week on what's going around globally as well as in your region. Thanks again for joining us, and here's the URL where you can access AppsFlyer's iOS 14 and ATT dashboard. Have a great day.
Thanks, John. That was awesome. If you want to speak more with John, you go to the speaker green room below. Quick reminder, speaker green room below is where all of our speakers are going to be at the end of their sessions. We can continue the conversation, and don't forget to ask more in the Q&A chat. So moving on to our next session is going to be our first panel of the day, which is paid acquisition channels which always win. I'm going to kick this over right now to Celine Schwartz, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Mammoth Media. She is going to be our moderator, and she's going to introduce the rest of her panel. So, Celine, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, AGS, for having us. We're going to be talking today about paid acquisition channels. and how they've been impacted with ATT and what are the new approaches that have been emerging since. So I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm Solène Schwartz. I'm CEO and co-founder of Mammoth Media. We are a Gen Z entertainment studio. We focus on a few things, including Creatorly, a TikTok influencer network. And so I'm going to let the awesome panelists introduce themselves. Wen, do you want to kick it off?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Celine, for the short intro, and thank you, AGS. My name is Wen Guo. I'm the founder of Booper. We are a dog social network with a mission to build community for pet and pet owners online and offline. Previously, my UA experience lies in e-commerce, subscription, and mobile gaming. My last job, I worked as part of the Nike growth team, driving new membership growth globally through our app businesses. I specifically worked and owned app marketing for the sneakers app in our key areas, and led go-to-market planning for the Nike Training Club premium product.
Nice. Thank you, Wen. Faith, do you want to tell us who you are and where you work at?
Sure. So my name is Faith Price, and I've been in mobile marketing, specifically app install marketing, for about 6 years now, working exclusively in the games industry. So right now I'm at a company called Double Down Interactive, and we have, we're one of the first to market for social casino games in the mobile space. And I manage the user acquisition, retention, and ASO team there. And previous to that, I was at a company called Big Fish Games, also working across the social casino, casual titles, and some mid-core as well. So spend a lot of time in the game space. It's a space I love and really enjoy, especially getting to do events with ladies like you, and we can talk about what we've been doing in this space.
100%. Gina?
Cool, thank you. My name is Gina Kwong. I'm in mobile growth at Electronic Arts. This is my latest role in gaming. I lead all of our paid social buys for the team. It's a relatively young team here at EA, and we support a lot of the mid-core games, mobile mid-core games that we have currently. And before that, I was with Machine Zone at Lovin'. So I had the opportunity to work on the Machine Zone IPs, as well as a lot of the casual games in the Match 3 vertical under the AppLovin family. And I've been in this mobile marketing industry for closer to a decade. I've been thinking about this. I was like, is it closer to 9 or 10 years? And I have definitely seen a lot of different industries. Like I started with online dating, Zoosk, and then I went into kind of like a social network, which is it's still around, Smule. Actually, recently, I still have a lot of friends there, so I'm very apprised of what's going on. And was at wine.com before Machine Zone AppLovin'. So I really do love mobile. I think it's definitely like it's no longer just the future, it's the present. And I really enjoy events like this as both as a participant and a panelist. Yeah, last time I was talking at AGS was actually in San Francisco while I was at wine.com. So it's a very different venue this time, but I'm very excited to be here.
Wow, 10 years ago, that was the birth of the performance mobile marketing world, with I think the IDFA was invented in 2012 and depreciated recently. So I'll start with the impact that you all have seen on mobile marketing from the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has changed user behavior in a lot of different ways and impacted mobile marketers in a variety of ways, depending on what the audience, the KPI, and the business models are. So Faith, do you want to start with kind of telling us a little bit about which has been your most effective paid UA channel through the pandemic, and what are the biggest changes that you've witnessed?
So for us, as I mentioned, Double Down was one of the first in the space for social casinos. So we have a flagship casino app that's over 10 years old. And I think the biggest change for us is like a lot of the verticals in the gaming space is we received a substantial boost from the fact that people were looking for things that they could do indoors by themselves, essentially by themselves or with their small group of acquaintances. And that actually made the majority of our channels, and we go across a lot of the social, the search, and the DSPs ad networks. It made a lot of them just perform well. So we actually were able to see it as an opportunity to provide more users with something to do for something to do to entertain themselves. And so we didn't really have one specific channel that performed better than another. Everything just sort of seemed to rise up if it was a good, solid channel to start with. One of the other interesting things that happened is we have a pretty big footprint in North America because we partnered with a company that does floor games. And so we saw with this pandemic, actually a lot of other countries that maybe we hadn't necessarily had a footprint in before, we saw their KPIs improve during this time frame. As not just the US, but sort of the world was looking for things to do.
That's really interesting. Did you see a similar thing, Gina, with the games on your end, where mostly you saw that people had more time to spend on their phone and were consuming and kind of paying? I assume you're partly IAP based the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's no secret that the gaming space really did benefit from the pandemic, and we have seen a lot of more kind of users coming in to the games, both like paid and organic. And to just answer the original question, we haven't really seen a whole lot of like change in terms of kind of the different types of channels. I mean, the big two are still the big two. I think it just gave us a little bit more room to test maybe other channels that we normally wouldn't as much, right? And I think that it really gave us a lot of learnings that maybe we wouldn't have had as quickly. But yeah, the games really, I mean, I only joined EA actually last October, so I can really only speak to that. But and our team is relatively young, so we don't have as much kind of performance history at this point. But the results in the last year has been phenomenal for us.
That's awesome. So I'll now move on to the impact of the recent Apple release, end of April. Finally, Apple released ATT. It has been a surprisingly slow release so far, with less than 20% adoption a month and a half in. It appears that Apple is releasing 14.5 just a little slower than the other iOS to give the ecosystem a little bit of time to adapt. As a result, mobile marketers are only just starting to kind of grasp the impact on the CPM, the LTV, and overall the media buying. Do you guys plan on shifting your ad spend to other paid channels, or maybe to pay more attention on a more organic approach with the early signal that you guys are seeing from the iOS 14.5 release? And when I'll let you start on what you've been doing on the organic side.
Yeah, so absolutely. So for Booper, we're a very early stage company. We're actually founded in the fall of 2020. So we haven't really been doing a lot of paid in terms of driving new user growth. And we, as a dog social network, we are facing this challenge of and how the network effect. How do we reach our audience through hyper-local targeting? So we're hyper-focused on our dog owners, especially the urban, the millennial dog owners, as they're our key target audience. So some of these organic approaches I've done include sponsoring dog poo bags to our neighborhood association. So I actually printed out 100,000 dog poo bags with Booper branding and give it away to the neighborhood association to help keep our cities clean. So these organic efforts such as poo bags, such as like branded merch, branded posts, and also hosting a event for our neighborhood to get us as well as the local businesses opportunity to reach out to our community has been our main method of marketing. So to long story short, we are hyper-focused in organic through events, through sponsored products, through blog posts, and working with micro dog influencers on Instagram to help promote our app. Long-term wise, I am looking forward to start testing out different paid social posts to kind of understand what our consumers are looking for, and but that's coming up in the next few weeks.
Nice. That is so awesome to be able to start doing those community-based type events for organic marketing again.
Yeah,
Gina, what about on your end? What have you seen since ATT?
Yeah, as you can imagine, for a company like us where we do have a decent budget, right? And potentially 50% of your budget could go away in terms of pay, or at least to be able to track that spend is quite alarming. And so we have just such amazing analytics team behind us. We have like just a lot of people kind of putting in a lot of effort as prepared as possible given the kind of piecemeal information that we've been getting. So since then we have, as you said, like the adoption's a little slower. So we have been pleasantly surprised that a lot of our sub 14.5 campaigns are still performing well. Actually, in some cases, better than before. Maybe because advertisers are moving a little bit away from iOS and going into Android to hedge their bets, things like that. But for us, for now, we are continuing to test like 14.5 plus campaigns and spending on the campaigns that are working well. So we're just basically going where the data lead us.
That's the right way to go. On your end, Faith, how are you seeing the mobile casino ecosystem being impacted?
So I think we're seeing similar trends to probably most other gaming verticals in this space. We've definitely seen more competition on Android over the last couple of months. That's led to, we're monitoring all the KPIs. So, the challenge there being the user value is staying consistent, but KPIs continue to increase as there's more and more competition in that space. So we're looking at doing a lot of testing of different types of partners. I think one of the challenges is going to be the fact that there are a lot of DSPs in the space, and they're essentially bringing sort of a similar value, and there's a lot of competition for the exact same pieces of inventory. So we're really looking outside of that and saying, is there people we can partner with who have unique inventory? Maybe look at like web to mobile. What sorts of new channels can we be looking to test that are outside of what's standard? And I really think too that this is going to be sort of a wake-up call for DSPs. There's just been such a proliferation of them over the past 5 years. And again, they all have a sort of similar value. And with iOS 14.5 and the ATT, it's really hard for them to, I think it's going to be harder for them to prove that value and to get people to testing in. So I really think it's a chance in the industry to say, what can the inventory and the media partners do that brings something new to the table that really helps with this sort of challenge and this changing space?
I love how we are staying true to kind of our core mobile marketers DNA around data-driven, constant testing, no matter what we go through. So what about Facebook automated app ads? Faith, have you been seeing success with that?
We've been running AAA ads for a while now. And I think it's very much for these types of Facebook campaigns, it's very much just dependent on your game, the genre, the competition in that specific space, your user. There is no sort of, I think, one size fits all results for AAA. For us, our approach has been to do a lot of different campaign tests. And what we found is, the campaigns which are successful don't really necessarily last as long as, historically we've seen campaigns last. And also, again, over the past month or so, this is where we're starting to see the impact from iOS 14.5, is that AAA has really increased in price. So I think you can find success, but you're going to have to do a lot of testing, and then you're going to have to continue to test, and it's not really like the solution for everything on Facebook, right? It's just another type of campaign to add to your arsenal of all the other types of campaigns that you test.
Got it. Is it your feeling too, Gina, on AAA?
Yes, I want to preface this by saying I'm a big fan of AAA. I definitely have seen like a lot of success with it, with the titles that I've run previously and currently. But I definitely hear what Faith is saying, because it really depends on your product, right? Because some of them I've definitely seen, like lookalikes, perform much better in terms of ROAS. And in gaming, that's the KPI, that's the biggest KPI that we generally look at. And I think it's definitely a tool that you should test. And if it works for your product, definitely utilize it. It generally returns the best CPIs. It gives Facebook the most chance to find the users that would kind of convert in your product. So, yep, that's all I gotta say about AAA. I can go on, but
I love the enthusiasm. So wrapping up, we have 3 very different size companies here with different target audiences and KPI and different budgets. So if you have to leave with one piece of advice for other apps similar to yours on what they should focus on for the remainder of the year, knowing that in our industry, who knows what's going to happen for the remainder of the year. We just heard this morning that Google is taking some pretty big step on their end too. But as of today, what advice would you give apps, startups companies who are in a similar ecosystem as you are? When do you want to kick it off?
Yes, sure. So Booper is a very early stage company. So as an early stage company, we're bootstrapping. We don't have millions of dollars of ad budget to spend like large gaming companies. I think for smaller startup founders, it's really important to know your target audience and be able to directly reach to these people first before you try to expand to paid social and try to acquire users that way. And also knowing And on making sure that you're able to afford these paid advertising buys. It's really important having an LTV model, knowing how much you can afford instead of just, follow the Facebook ad buying trend and just get users, but without having that revenue model to support it. So that would be my advice for early startup founders.
Love it. Faith, do you want to take it?
Sure. So I think for us, and we're sort of at that mid-level company, we will, continue to focus on paid UA, but it's all about testing more so than it was in the past. I think, we're cognizant of the fact that the industry is moving quickly, the marketplace is ever changing, and so it's diversification and testing. You can't be reliant on 2 sources, 3 sources. You need to have a portfolio and recognize that some months, some quarters, one partner will be doing really well, and that won't stay. The next quarter, it'll be a different partner. And so being able to be flexible with your budgets and really direct where you want that money to go. And again, just making sure you have a big enough, a wide enough variety of partners to work with, especially across, both search, social, and the ad networks, the DSPs, etc. So you're not reliant on just one particular source. And then the second thing I would say is just really we're going to work on being more engaged with the product development teams, right? And having those conversations as they're working on new games around, what is the cost of this game in terms of user acquisition? What is your breakdown of Android versus iOS, etc.? How can we be smart in terms of considering the long-term UA implications when they're developing games, when they're implementing new features? So really trying to be more, just more thoughtful and collaborative and analytical throughout the entire life cycle of a game.
And just one quick follow-up question, Faith. You mentioned that this was the right time to think about diversification and maybe being slightly less focused on the pure DSP partners and open to other partners. Do you think, so at Creatorly, we're working with a lot of big mobile companies who would not have considered doing a kind of more organic, authentic investment in building their TikTok and Snap presence and working with content creators. Do you think this kind of investment makes sense in the casual casino space that you're in, or does it remain something that should be more purely performance driven?
I think it's a challenge because the casino space has a lot more sort of regulations around it, and you have to be a lot more careful. The other thing I would say, and again, it comes back to working with the dev team, is making sure you have those things in the game that lend themselves well to something like TikTok. What are those exciting moments? What are those things that could be interesting from an organic standpoint? If you don't have those in the game, it's going to be hard to manufacture them, which doesn't mean you can't work with influencers or something like TikTok. It's just going to make it more challenging.
You're right. That's a really good point, and less authentic, which I think the whole point here is the more authentic approach. What about you, Gina? What advice do you want to leave our viewers with?
Yeah, so I guess EA is probably the bigger company. We are a fairly small team still, so I think that for us, I would advise kind of any size company to just test, right? Partner with the studios or the game developers or the product developers that help you as a UA marketer to figure out what is going to bring the most users to the app, regardless of what the product is. And we are very cognizant of diversifying our channel mix, and it doesn't matter how much we're spending for each game. It's our biggest thing is making sure that we're going to meet our goals. So we kind of, my biggest advice is really just always like test. So once you have that data, then you can kind of run with it.
So in a nutshell, diversification, testing, data-driven, follow the LTV, our DNA. Well, thanks everyone. It was really great getting to talk to you all.
Thanks, Celine. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, ladies. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. That was great. So you can talk with all of them in the speaker green room below. Moving on, our first fireside chat of the day is going to be between two experts, Benoit Viale from Vivino and Alexei Shimanda from Addictive. Addictive is also one of our amazing sponsors, so thank you, Addictive. They're going to be talking about how to scale revenue, personalization, and predictive analysis. It's going to be a really good conversation, lots of data, lots of information. So let's get right to that, and don't listen to me anymore, blabbing. So Alexei, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hi, Benoit. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Alexei.
I'm so excited to speak with you today. I'd love to. We have 15 minutes. We'd love to keep it short and sweet. For those of us that are not aware of what Vivino is, can you give a brief intro on Vivino?
Yes, very briefly. Vivino is essentially a crowdsourced information repository for wine. So it's a large community of over 50 million users who just rate wines, contribute their ratings and their reviews on all sorts of wines, hundreds of thousands of different wines. And it's a place where people can go to find out more about specific wine, whether they're at a restaurant or in retail or online, and they want to know what a wine is worth and what it tastes like. This is this crowdsourced information system. And obviously, the way we make money is by monetizing this information on one side, and also by powering an e-commerce activity, a marketplace that we run that is being enriched by all this information we have. So it's at the core, an information system is really what Vivino is all about.
Nice. And I've been a heavy user of Vivino. I've been actually called for bottles that I thought were good, and then people were using Vivino to check me out, and I got burned like this. So I'm very familiar with Vivino. And I think you've achieved massive growth, and a lot of it is really internal, sort of organic growth. I know that you're very heavy on personalization. Can you describe how how deep you go in personalization, and do you have some examples to share with the audience?
Yeah, so personalization is at the very core of what gives us an edge as an app and also as an e-commerce player. It manifests in multiple ways for us. Obviously, one of the immediate things is as people tell us what they like and how much they like individual wines, and we can also see their activity in terms of which wines they scan and which wines they search, they view on the app or on the website. We learn about their tastes. And as we learn about their tastes, we can start personalizing the wines that we present to them. So I would say level 0 of personalization for us is powering recommendations and being able to be more targeted in our recommendations and in the communications we send. So that's a big piece of it is merchandising and personalizing the merchandising, which wines we present. CRM activity, like sending less messages and being more relevant in our communications. And the third piece is from a marketing tool perspective, particularly for things like retargeting, being able to retarget people with the right sort of wine, with the right sort of proposal at the right time. And so really narrowing down on this to just improve our conversions and improve our return on investment for the various marketing activities we have.
And what is, I know that one of the things that a lot of advertisers are doing is they build a creative strategy, and then they share this creative strategy among all the channels, and they really reuse that same idea, that same concept. And I know that you guys do things a little differently. How do you view a channel, and how, what do you think about how do you think about personalization at the channel level, the geo level? Like, how can you really dig deep into how you think about that?
Yeah, I think it, first of all, there are different levels of capabilities by channel. So, there's some things that we've been doing for a long time, for example, on Facebook around targeting and, audience modeling and these kind of stuff to really try and put in front of the audience the right wine based on their specific individual profile. It could be different sort of based on wine style, it could be based on individual products, it could be based on, cart abandonment and things like this. So there's some channels where we can go really deep and be very granular. Some channels where on the other end of the spectrum where we're much less targeted and focused. And I would put probably AdWords, SEM, sort of on this front, where in our product category in particular, being alcohol, we're very limited in the amount of information that we can actually inject into Google to do this personalization. So that would be the other end of the spectrum where we're not as targeted as we'd like. And then some emerging channels where we're starting to be much more specific. We started, for example, with you guys at Addictive, with a broader approach, but now we're introducing, more specific retargeting, wine style, specific products, cart embodiments, this kind of stuff. Same with Criteo, we started with a bit more of a general approach, and now we're refining our targeting and our retargeting criteria more and more as we go. So I would say, depending on the channel, the capabilities are a bit different. Overall sort of goal for us is still to try and be as relevant, as personalized, as timely as possible. So that's where we see the biggest return and definitely the highest conversion rates. That's the number one thing that drives the higher conversion rate for us is how targeted we can be. So the more we can be based on the capabilities of the individual channels, that's really what we're trying to push.
And that's interesting because and that's a great segue for what I wanted to chat about next, which is, you mentioned you started sort of broad, you're narrowing down, and it ultimately begs the question of how do you, the importance of holistic marketing, the importance of really sharing one story. And I know that this is something that's really important to you. Can you share with us, how do you see that user journey from a holistic marketing standpoint?
Yeah, it's super critical for us. And I would say, we're probably only part of the way there. Like, we have a long way to go in terms of telling a more integrated story. The interesting thing with Vivino is a lot of people join Vivino or know of Vivino for really the utility aspect of the app. You scan a bottle of wine and there's a bit of this magic moment where you scan the bottle and then you see all the information pops up. The wine is being recognized, you see the score, you see the price, you see the, all those reviews, taste characteristics, all this stuff. So that's really interesting. But that's a very different experience from how we make money for the most part, which is by, the commerce activity and the marketplace sort of activity in particular. And so for us, what we're seeing is, as a result of the fact that those two activities are pretty distinct, pretty different, there's a lot of upside, that's a positive way to put it, in just converting our users better to being customers. And
we call this untapped opportunity.
Untapped opportunity, exactly. And so it's, we have this giant reservoir basically of people that we have yet to convert. And the way for us to really convert them better is to tell this more holistic story. So one of the things that we started doing with great results so far, really sort of a, multiple X improvement in conversion, is on the onboarding of users. So with new users in particular, sorry, Alex, did I lose you a little bit?
There you go. You're back now.
Okay,
I lost you at untapped opportunity, and then we lost track.
Oh, okay, my bad. So what I'm saying is a big opportunity for us is to better convert our users into buyers. And we're saying that when we actually really take the opportunity to tell our story from the start through an onboarding process of new users in particular, this conversion happens a lot more naturally. And we're, multiple times better at converting our new users. Now that we set in place this onboarding flow, we're much better at converting those users to buyers than we are with people who otherwise are not really told this more comprehensive story of what we do, what our intent is, what our proposition is. So the idea will be for us through, not just at onboarding, it's a prime opportunity for us to inform our users, but also through all the different touch points that we have with our users. Like, how do we reinforce the same story and tell really our, express this value proposition in a more comprehensive way, in a very consistent way across all these different touch points. So yeah, big opportunity for us to continue to improve on this, but we're seeing some early signs through onboarding in particular that this really pays off in a big way.
And that's really interesting, because a lot of the partners that we talk to, they ultimately struggle to find the right balance, and some are very focused on lower end of the funnel, really direct response. I want a conversion within 3 days, 7 days period. And there's a struggle because that pool is limited until or unless you actually grow that top funnel, and then the top funnel is harder to measure as well. And so what goals do you typically have for top of funnel awareness? How do you keep track of whether that's good spend for you? Obviously, assuming that it's going to convert down the line, but how do you keep a shorter time frame on that?
Yeah, so as you were talking about this, like multiple thoughts that come to my mind. So I'm trying to organize them in a logical way. The first thing I would say is, one of the things that's quite unique about our business is just the size of the pool. So the top of the funnel is kind of a very organic, natural growth sort of thing that we've enjoyed for a long time. So to give you an idea of the order of magnitude, about 500,000, 500,000 new users are just showing up every month, downloading the app and installing the app. So we don't really have, and there's more we're going to do to even increase and accelerate the top of the funnel. But really, one of the big opportunities for us, once again, is we have such a big top of the funnel that really anything we can do to convert better towards the bottom of the funnel is a very high ROI for us. We haven't historically had to worry that much about continuing to feed the top of the funnel, just because we have so many people at the top of the funnel that are coming in. So for us, a lot of our marketing activity and marketing spend has been indeed on the bottom, sort of the lower part of the funnel, which is converting those users into buyers. But we're finding that if we have a much better chance at converting them, to my point earlier, if we actually inform them from the very beginning of their journey on what really we can provide. So this more holistic approach, really pays off. This being said, there are some big opportunities for us to also sort of, build up the influx of top of the funnel sort of users. If we can target the right users, those can really turn out to be really high value, high lifetime value customers at the end of the day. And to do that, what we're really focusing on is building some predictive models that really help us predict earlier on what the lifetime value of these customers is going to be based on how they're acquired, based on their early behavior on the app, for example. Really trying to associate, without waiting sort of a year, associate an LTV that informs our marketing investments and help us sort of allocate more or less resources to acquiring specific type of users at the top of the funnel. So we kind of bridge the uncertainty of investing on the top of the funnel, which we need to do more of. Yeah. We bridge that uncertainty with this predictive modeling that helps us predict how people are eventually going to behave and how they're going to convert. While at the same time, certainly putting a good amount of our investment on the lower part of the funnel, because that's where we see the direct ROI. But with the right predictive modeling, we're able to now predict where it makes sense for us to invest in, earlier stage, like top of the funnel users, because we know how they're going to convert over time.
And that's what I really wanted to touch upon. We have only a few minutes left, so I really want to touch upon predictions that you're making. How is what are you predicting exactly? You're predicting what they're buying, how much they're buying, what wine they will like, and so what sort of elements are you using to predict that, and what are you predicting essentially?
Yeah, so in terms of the type of predictive modeling, we do, I would say, 2 or 3 sort of different kinds of predictions here. One is just the lifetime value of these customers, of these users, of these customers. What is their likelihood to buy over an extended period of time, their frequency of purchase, their AOV that they're going to be purchasing at. And for us, the takeaway is how much cumulative contribution margin we're going to generate for these customers over a certain horizon of time. And right now, because the business is still relatively new, we're just setting an arbitrary limit of like a 12 months prediction. So we're trying to predict what is going to be our cumulative contribution margin of these customers over the next 12 months. So that's one part of prediction. Now there's another part of prediction that is more specific to and relates a little bit more to what I was saying earlier about really retargeting and making sure we match users with the right products. And that's more predicting the likelihood that a certain user, given their taste profile, is going to buy a given product, and using that to filter the communications and really augment, if you will, the signal to noise ratio, where instead of just blasting a ton of communications hoping that something will stick, we've been able actually over the last couple of years to dramatically reduce the volume of communications per user and still increase their revenue per user. So this, finding this optimization where we want to maximize revenue, but we also know that there's sort of an equilibrium that needs to be found where if you email too much, just the noise becomes overwhelming. If you email too little, you're leaving some money on the table. So trying to find this this ideal balance to maximize kind of signal to noise ratio. So that I would say those are probably the 2 biggest types of predictions that we're really focusing on.
Nice. And it's interesting because in the app economy, we actually run a lot of predictions similar to you for apps that want to know if you like app A, will you like app B? Similar to wines, essentially, your product is wine, other products are apps, but it's a very similar approach. I want to be cautious of time for everyone. I did want to ask one last thing. I've heard rumors of an opt-in rate that is quite high on Vivino compared to a lot of the apps we're talking to. So I'd love for you to share, what that opt-in rate is, and why do you think, even if it's anecdotal, why do you think that is?
Yeah, so the main thing, for us, obviously, like everybody else, I think, was a good amount of anxiety around the 14.5 sort of rollout. And we've seen the opt-in rate, for us, sort of settle around, close to 40%, 37.5%, which I think is, really speaking, high. We'd like it to be higher. But I think the reason why it's so high is people see the value, in the app and kind of understand that the more information they share, the more valuable, the more trustworthy the recommendations and the more value the app is going to become for them. So having this sort of direct, intuitive relationship for people between their willingness to share information and the quality of the output that they're getting, I think is really what drives this up. And the thing that we enjoy from our users in general is just a high level of trust that we're not meddling with the data. We're not manipulating ratings, for example. It's a very democratic sort of egalitarian, society where everybody has equal voice when it comes to their ratings. And so basically, we're trying to empower people with this equal access to information and equal access also to contributing to this information, to this pool of collective intelligence. So far, so good. It seems to stick pretty well. I mean,
Well,
we'd
I'll
love
send
to
I'll
push
send
this.
this link to some advertisers who are having 4% opt-in rates, and I'll ask them to watch the chat.
Great.
Benoit, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really glad we were able to chat, and I look forward to our next sessions together. And I wish you the best of the weekend, and bye to everyone else watching as well.
Thank you. Bye, Alexei.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the speaker green room below to have more conversations. And if you want to get to know any more about any of our sponsors, if that's a proper sentence, then on your profiles for this platform, which we custom built, by the way, yeah, I'm going to say that because basically this entire thing you're at is not rented. We built this from scratch. So go to your profiles, and if you like any of the sponsors or want to learn more from any of the sponsors, just click their checkbox, and then they'll be in touch with you respectfully. And they're also in the speaker green room below, of course, here in the chats, and as well multiple logos to click through to their websites as well. Next, we have an awesome panel with Shimon Samuel from Best Buy is going to be leading it. We're going to talk about how to keep users interested with the people-centric approach. So Shimon will be joined by Erin Smith from T-Mobile Mobile Tuesdays, and also Gene Collings from Ring Central. It's going to be a fun panel, very awesome, lively group, and I'm going to kick it right over to the amazing Shimon to take it away and get started.
I am Shimon Samuel. I'm a product manager with Best Buy, and I'm really excited to spend some time with Erin and Gene here, learning more about how they retain users and engage them and keep them interested in the product and coming back for more. A little bit about myself. I've been a product manager for the last 10 years, really focused in the mobile app space. And let's see, COVID. This year, I have moved 4 different times in my house to find a better setup that looks really good. And that's all about me. How about you, Erin?
Yeah, hi, Erin Smith. I work for T-Mobile, and my particular focus is on our Tuesdays Customer Appreciation Program. So primarily this is served through an app, but we also have built microsite to think beyond the app. And I mean, COVID-wise, yeah, I've been working from home. I have 2 small children, they're 6 and 8, and so trying to do virtual school and have 2 full-time working parents has been a challenge, but yeah, we've been able to make it work. Great. And then Gene, what about you?
Hi, I'm Gene Collings. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the Director of Lifecycle Marketing at Ring Central. So just a little bit about Ring Central. We provide cloud-based unified communications and collaboration solutions essentially to SMBs and enterprises. So I know that's a bit mouthful, but essentially our core product is really a unified app with messaging capabilities, video conferencing, and cloud-based phone all in one platform. So we essentially compete in the same space as Microsoft Teams and Zoom and any other collaboration tools. So I manage a team of lifecycle marketing experts that really focus on app adoption and engagement for our SMB customers. So we leverage multiple platforms like in-app messaging, emails, and programs to onboard, nurture, and engage our users within unified app.
Nice.
Well, anecdote, Ring Central is in California, Southern California, right?
That is correct. They're in Belmont.
So I used to work inside the Ring Central building years ago when they used to be in Foster City. Big Ring Central sign on our building, and we were just a little startup. You're like, I work at the Ring Central building.
Yeah, I've only been to the office once, and then pandemic hit, so.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, I'm really glad to spend some time with you. I'm excited to learn from you. And really what I wanted to kick it off with is just understanding from your perspective, when you think about the user experience, and I distinguish the user experience as different from the user interface. User interface is just what people are interacting with. User experience is really I come to your app and how does it make me feel and what do I like about it and these sorts of things, and how does it relate to your company and the product you're delivering. And so the question is, if the starting point for retaining users is actually having an experience that's delightful and something people want to get again and again, what is it that your app does to address that particular need for customers? That first time great impression. Erin, you want to start?
Yeah, so to set some context, the Tuesdays program is what we refer to as our customer appreciation. It's our weekly appointment with our customers to, give them that extra bonus. Thank you for being a customer with T-Mobile. No strings attached. Essentially, just here, let's give you some offers that we've actually very highly curated and set up with partners with T-Mobile. So. What we had done actually very recently was done a UX sprint design. So using Google's framework for UX performance and I guess you would call it optimization, got together with lots of people from around the business, spanning all the way beyond from a dev to, key marketing leadership and understanding what the core issue is and trying to solve for what our onboarding first time user experience was for our program, and how can we better introduce what Tuesdays is, because it is a little bit of a foreign concept. We're not a loyalty app. We're not actually asking you to spend more money to get something from us. It's just more about like, this is what our program is, this is when to show up, this is what the type of things you can understand and get, and what you can expect to see here. And our previous sort of first time user experience didn't really address any of that. It was just kind of like some pretty graphics and like, let's get people in and hopefully the homepage serves it. So through this design sprint, and then we did a number of UX studies. We implemented a new preloader scenario, a new authentication path where we had a lot of really cool, interesting ways that we could kind of highlight the type of offers that we have and the brands we work with, and enabling people to get more information about our program. And then we land them on the homepage in this, really easy to understand layout. So it's like, oh, if I want to go to a sweepstakes, it's here. And they didn't have to do a lot of thumb work to try and understand and get it. It just was served up in a very logical way. And that was all based off of getting customer insights as well as taking in, customer behaviors that we had from, prior experiences in the app. So yeah, it's one way that we have found has increased our retention rate. People are coming back, and then also just a better understanding, like they're less confused about who we are and why we're here. So that's been great to see that after studies of the feature launch to see that we actually achieved our goals.
Hey, Jean, you look like you're about to jump in, so go for it.
Yeah, no, sorry. What I would just kind of want to highlight or emphasize, what Erin was talking about, all that heavy emphasis on onboarding and that first time experience with users is so key, because, we all know across the industry, day zero is where churn happens the most, or where the drop off is the highest, right? Mm-hmm. So we're always trying to figure out how can we make that onboarding experience really easy for our users so that they can just ramp up on the app quickly and easily, right? So at RingCentral, day zero is an area where we really look at, and for me, we use in-app messaging, emails to kind of create this onboarding flow that educates our users. Hey, this is what this app is. Here are some high key value actions that we want you to take that we know that will drive retention. So yeah, onboarding is key and really important for us as well.
So interesting. So Jean, if I understood, you're talking about the onboarding experience being something about an education for users, making sure they understand, what it is that they're here for. And Erin, you talked about using Google Design Sprints to get an understanding of what the customer's needs are. And you're approaching it actually from completely different perspectives, because Erin, it sounds like what you have is a loyalty app, right? You're offering something to customers for being customers, right? And you're attracting them to say, hey, there's no reason for you to download this app other than to continue to have a relationship with us. And so when you open the app and you see that there's things that are there for you, the reason that it appeals to you is you did the research up front to understand what it is that users want, so that when they do open that app, their first impression, it's almost like you know them. And so how do you make a great first impression? Do some research into customer needs. I love that. And from Best Buy's perspective, when we think about onboarding, we look at what is it that a user needs to have the ideal experience. And the approach I've taken is actually to weave it in through, because we're a shopping app primarily, so customers tend to come there and shop, which means they're more of a journey than a start-stop. And as part of this, things like location enablement, right? If they enable their location, it's easier to find a store, easier to locate a product. We don't ask them to do that up front. We wait until it's contextually relevant and then say, you can do all the searching you want, but if you enable your location, we'll do the searching for you. And so there's just different approaches to, do you take the onboarding where up front, like, so you're onboarding with information, like Jean said, right? Or you take onboarding for the tools and, what you need to do, the capabilities. That's kind of what I talked about. And Aaron, you talk about just onboarding people for why you should even be here. So segueing into that, it almost sounds like what you're talking about is a bit like, different ways to attract the users and retain them, right? And I think, Jean, you mentioned a bit about like how you message, is there in-app messaging, right? That's one of the strategies that companies employ to varying degrees of success. But I think you were saying that you actually have seen success in the area of in-app messaging for your customers. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, what's really good about in-app messaging is within the product, right? So we're able to serve up contextually. We're able to serve up based on segmentation, the right content to the right audience when they're in the app. But what I really like about how we use in-app messaging at RingCentral, at least, is these are tooltips. So we're actually pointing to the features, right? We're saying, hey, this is a high key value action that we know personally that will drive retention and adoption. So upfront, we're going to encourage users to take that action and learn about it and use it within the app.
Yeah, in-app messaging is really big, and push notifications are huge for our program as well. It's one of the biggest drivers to remind people to come in on the right day, getting them to come back and redeem. And then another thing is that we have our in-app messaging to serve some of our enterprise messaging. So at a very targeted way too. So it's like we can talk about our home internet to the right people, or we can talk about, Samsung devices to people who are Android users versus like iPhone users who may not be going in. We can really kind of target and get to the right people, the right sort of information, which, hey, while you're here having a moment with our brand, why don't we give you some other information that you might be interested in seeing?
Oh, well, that's great. Aaron, you're with T-Mobile, right? And so, I mean, this is obvious, but customers have different types of phones and they're different operating systems. I spent years as a product manager for Android apps. And one thing I found about Android customers is they would regularly be upset and offended when we would present them with an experience that was clearly designed for iPhone users, or is clearly using iPhone design patterns, classic ones like the back button and these sorts of things. And so when you are surfacing content that is targeted at your users, it's fantastic, right? I don't want to see iPhone cases if I'm an Android customer. And because you're T-Mobile, you would know that. Some other companies don't get down to that granular level, but the information doesn't exist in the logs and that information is accessible. But I find it interesting how you guys describe content in different ways, right? So, Jean, the content you're referring to is informative. You're inside the app and there's a tremendous amount of information, and we're helping you, both onboard, but also understand, where is it that I go to get the information I'm looking for? And Aaron, you refer to, this kind of content, this in-app messaging really as push notifications and maybe like a message center. And it reminds me about how different companies use the same language. When I joined Best Buy, there was all this conversation about mobile. And I was like, yeah, I'm in mobile. I'm on the mobile team. But it turns out they're talking about mobile phones, the category of sales. They're not talking about mobile apps, right? They talk about, we send the customer all kinds of alerts. I'm like, really? We haven't enabled push notifications in the app. Well, it turns out alerts to them, there's the emails. We're alerting the customer, right, by emailing them. And so, here we are, we're talking about in-app messaging, but we actually have different, definitions of what that means. So with that, let's move to a completely different topic, which is just the content itself, right? Like, so if you come to the app and there's a reason to be there, what would that be? Aside from, hey, I'm here to get free stuff, what is that information that people come back a second time, right? So we have that first impression, understanding what they need, understanding why they would come, and then trying to attract them and keep them. So what is it that has them coming back?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, the content in our app kind of all varies, right? So we have these offers that we have just this 1 week, then we have every week offers. So it's like this refresh of, like, we have Shell, for example, where we have a discount regularly with them. It's only available when you come in on Tuesday to save down. But we also have extras. We have sweepstakes. We have games that are associated with the sweepstakes. So it's not just like this, boring, let me put in my phone number or whatever entry method we have for that particular sweeps that week, but let's give them a little bit of entertainment piece. So we try to spice it up and have those sort of quick moments of entertainment. But we also have in-app messages. But when, thinking about our offer calendar too, we also put a lot of time and effort to these, curated offers where we're thinking about, like, all right, every week we got to make sure we have a big hero offer, something that's either really rich or a well-known brand, and then supplement it with a wider array of types of offers so that we can kind of really have this broad reach. And then on top of that, we're also looking at doing geolocated offers. So, as there's very specific brands like Dunkin' Donuts is not really on the West Coast, but it's everywhere else. So if we're putting in an offer like that, we have to make that decision. Is this a geolocated offer, or is this something we want to have for everyone? So I would say too, just everything we launch, like literally everything from offers to new features, changing our push application strategy, everything is with user studies. Like, we've either prepped it, prior, and we've done a user study, we've done an attentive survey, we've done a focus group, we've done interviews. I mean, like, literally always built behind, like, does this make sense for our customers? And we have multiple millions of people coming in. We got to make sure we're building and putting something out that's great. And then, our feature-wise, we also have, we use Google's framework for measuring UX as well. So we're thinking about happiness and engagement, retention and adoption and task completion. So everything is launched with the thought of, like, all right, one, does it make sense? And then how did it perform? And feeding that into the engine of, like, building in new content so we can always be driving that flywheel of, people coming back the next week because, maybe they didn't get an offer they wanted that week. Well, how do we keep them coming back the next week? Because they're like, this isn't serving what I want, but they have to have that faith that when they come back, that there is going to be something they want.
Okay, I hope everyone's listening really closely, because what you just described is the holy grail of everything. How do you retain users? Well, we find out what they want, and then we ask them again, and then we do some more research, and then we dig a little deeper, and then we think into the future, and we measure it, and then we come back and we iterate. And these things are really challenging because there's a lot of ambiguity there, right? You can't say, a year in advance, how much money you're going to make off of which ads, and it's very difficult to predict these things, and so it can be challenging to invest that much time at the onset to deliver on an outcome later on. And so I really hope that everyone's listening, because this is how you do it. Really, there's not an easy way to do it. But that's it's like B2C, right? And so you're attracting consumers, and there's a lot of joy there, right? And I work in the corporate world, and so it's almost like B2B. I have a lot of people reaching out to me. Hey, we have this product, we have this service, we'd like you to try out. That's different, right? And so for Gene, you're B2B primarily, right? And so you don't maybe have the luxury of attracting customers and retaining them in a way that's engaging. You're selling to them essentially. How do you bridge that gap between needing to sell something but also want to attract them and have them want to be in your app?
Yeah, I appreciate you calling out that difference. We are definitely B2B, so we're serving our customers who want to talk to people at work, right? Their other employees or peers, or even to their customer. So for us, content is really about, we're educating and we're pointing out the different features within the app, but we have to communicate to them in a way that it is relevant to them, right? So for example, SMB, which is small, medium businesses, a flower shop. A specific feature on the phone may be much more relevant than an enterprise, for example, universities, the staff that they use this platform to talk to each other. They may not care about that phone feature. They may care more about this messaging feature, and how we talk to them is very different than how we talk to SMBs, right? Same thing with freemium. We also have a freemium product that businesses can use. That one, we have more leeway or the luxury to be more joyful in our content, right? So we can be playful in our language, in our creative, in our copy, and speak to them differently. So content for us is, the copy and the creative that we send to our users, and we're always trying to optimize by doing experiments and A/B testing to see what really works with each segment audience.
Wild. Okay, so I love that, right? So, Jean, your approach to, retention really is, customers returning. I hesitate just for a second because I don't like the jargon, and I say retention and it means something, and I'm like, well, how can I say that in a different way? But I found really interesting that your approach is to target the users by their needs. A small, a flower shop is not the same thing as the Best Buy corporate office in Seattle. And so when I open the app, what I'm getting as a returning customer is content that's designed for me and my needs. Like you say, like I have coworkers, I have colleagues, I have people I work with that I have to communicate with. I'm interested in something completely different from, the restaurant across the street. And so you're retaining customers really by keeping them engaged, by knowing what they want. Right. And Aaron, you're doing the same thing in a completely different way. You're diving into the research and understanding what they need. And Jean, same thing, but you're doing it more at a segmentation level, understanding this customer segment and what their needs are. So, I feel like actually there's so much to have learned here, so much to have gained. I hesitate to ask the next question because I feel like you've already given so much, but if it was as simple as saying, gosh, I wish there was some low-hanging fruit, or is there a quick thing? Is there anything that you would recommend, right? So, if Aaron, if the key is so much of your success is these design sprints that you're doing, diving into customer needs before you do it and planning long-term, right? And Jean, the key to success is understanding the segments of users and what their needs are. How did you get it into the enterprise? How did you get the adoption for doing it the right way, right? So the right way, you can read a book, you can read an article, it's all over the place, right? It's a lot harder to actually implement it and get support from it in the enterprise than it is to just know how to do it. So, Jean, give me something that I can take back to work and say, okay, so here's the plan, people.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, data is key, right? Really, I am the marketing team, but I try to do a really good job of aligning with the product team and getting the data of our users, right? Like I want to understand what are the behaviors, what are the key features that they're clicking on, and that brings them back to the app. Like I mentioned earlier, like the high value actions, what that means to me is, okay, based on data, I have an understanding enterprise, customers really value these, let's just say, for example, 3 key features. So I'm going to use everything in my power, which is in-app messaging, email, to talk about those 3 key features to my enterprise customers so that they know how to use the app and really come back over and over again, right? Same thing with the other segments that I talked about, SMBs and freemium. So data, I think it's really key, just understanding who your users are. And to Aaron's point, user research, surveys, look at your support tickets, look at your support calls. What are the gaps to understand what are people missing, not understanding about your app? Take that as an opportunity to educate users within the app, right? So data was one. The second one I want to talk about that I think we've mentioned over and over before is experimentation, right? Like experiment as much as you can, A/B test, whether that's content, cadence, what are the right triggers? I think that's really important because over time, you will see that experience can only help retention in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jean, I think you covered it perfectly. Really, anything I would say would be like a repeat of what you were saying, almost exactly. In terms of to your question, Shimon, about like how can you drive adoption? I mean, I think I'm a little bit lucky in terms of T-Mobile has data really baked into the DNA of our mentality. So having informed decisions to make your business case to go forward. But if you happen to be in maybe a role or a particular business where you're not able to find it, I think I would just lean on. There's lots of white papers. There's these summits like that we're participating in right now, like where you can try and get and pull in some information, within a related segment. Because if you can't ask your own customers, like maybe you don't have the tools yet, try to use the other tools that you've got. I think that's the only supplemental thing I could think of. But yeah, it's data is totally key because you don't want to be spending your time working on something that is ultimately going to damage your product and the customer experience.
So the short answer is data. Data is the answer. But the longer answer is that the right kind of data is the answer, and you can source it from many places. You can do multivariate testing, you can do surveys, you can read customer comments. I personally have found the single most valuable source of data is your customer support team. They talk to customers and customers complain. At the different companies that I've worked at, what I like to do is find the support team, fly to wherever they are, and each person that I ask them one question. As a product manager for the app, if there was one thing that I could fix, it would make a difference for customers, what would that be? And I've seen the most success focusing on those products and those features that are direct from customer service because they talk to customers. So I love it. Data, customers, talking to users, knowing your users, taking the time to do it right, that makes all the difference. So thank you all. I could spend another 20, 30, 40 minutes talking to you. I learned so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. That is a great panel. I love it. Such great energy from that panel. Let's get into some more conversation with them in the speaker green room below. And moving on to our next chat of the day is going to be Wonder Vision, how Amadeus is leading the comeback for travel apps. This is thanks to YouAppy, one of our amazing sponsors. Be the last sponsor-involved session of the day. We're going to have Leo Guile. He's going to talk to Michael Bale, and they're going to have a great conversation. But let's just get right over to it. So, Leo, this virtual stage now belongs to you.
Hey, Michael. How are you, buddy?
Hey, man. How are you? Long time.
Been a long time, and ironically, we're talking about travel industry today, and I think the first time we got to know each other, I brought you with me to Sicily.
Yes, you did.
And we had some fun playing around in the Mediterranean and sailing around the sea.
Absolutely. Good times.
And you sailed yourself all the way over to Barcelona, to Madrid, and now you sit in Madrid, and tell us about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I work for Amadeus, which is based here in Madrid, and we're a large technology firm that really powers the ecosystem of travel, from airports to hotels to airlines, and of course to those who sell travel experiences to consumers. And I particularly look after an area that focuses in retail.
Awesome. Congratulations. I know you've been there a while and you're having a great time doing it. I see you posting all over the world, and that's exciting. And unfortunately, over the past year and a half, things have slowed down, so I don't see as many posts, but I hope to see them soon.
Exactly.
With Amadeus being a prolific travel company powering the back end of these reservation systems for all the world's travel companies, what ways is 2020 accelerated the technology and innovation you guys are focusing on to come back stronger and bigger than ever?
Yeah, of course. There's this interesting meme that's circulating that asks aloud, who's responsible for your digital strategy? And they ask, is it the CEO? Is it the CTO? Or is it the C19, right? And it's been a godsend. I mean, unfortunately, the pandemic, of course, has affected millions. But genuinely, for old dinosaurs like you and I in the mobile industry, it has resurrected what we've long wished for, which is people's use of technologies, people's use of mobility in particular, to have access to things at their fingertips genuinely. So more tangibly, and I have to laugh aloud because you and I always would patrol the halls of Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and we would just sit there and go, well, what are these QR codes? Whatever, they going to have meaningfulness and blah, blah, blah. And let's be honest, now if anyone has been educated on the use of a QR code, it has been the invitation to how to really interact in the world. From everything from appearing at a restaurant and trying to get those old school paper menus, which of course now are challenging, to more things related to the travel industry. So specifically, we're quite excited that we've introduced a lot of different elements to help alleviate frustrations of the traveler and those whom interact with the traveler. So more relevantly, we have something called Traveler ID, as interestingly named, it could be also as obviously named as you can think. And of course, having a credential and adjacent to your passport and to your visa eligibilities, now it is your COVID results or your vaccination results. And we've been able to create this in short order. And large airlines, as large as right now, Air Europa, which of course, if you travel soon from the States to visit me in Spain, Air Europa is a very logical choice in their application when you as a consumer, across all the different steps you need to do to validate your check-in process, we're empowering that part of it so that the consumer can feel very safe of their data as they upload it to the airline.
So I guess what you're saying is now you have kind of like a travel ID, a travel badge that kind of lets you travel seamlessly, maybe less friction throughout the world.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't yet apply for discounts at the rooftop of the W Barcelona, which we also used to frequent, but it does work to get you on board the plane.
And so you'll see all these other companies implementing this type of technology, you think, Michael?
I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think what also people want is trust with whom it is that they purchase that travel. So the challenge today, of course, there's a myriad of different providers, and you really genuinely as a consumer don't know whom are the ones you can trust and whom may have more nefarious motivations. And so by having something that's an industry standard, and we are considered an industry standard as Amadeus, we feel there's a good ecosystem that will gravitate to this, just like Air Europa has.
Interesting. So, okay, cool. So now we're going to have a much more seamless travel experience, one in which it takes this COVID-19 world and adopt some of the challenges we're facing. How are these travel companies or travel companies in general, how are you going to go about re-engaging some of those former consumers and putting their butts back in the seat?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first and foremost still, and I applaud the states for leading the vaccination efforts globally, but a lot of countries are far from there. So I think we're going to be at the mercy of PCR test, antigen test, COVID test. So let's start with that as a real frustration. People don't know. And it's a very ever-flowing subject matter of whether or not I need a test and within what duration do I need that test between when I arrive and from when I left. And it really differs by country, and it differs between eligibility of countries. So more pointedly, we've encouraged our travel sellers to get in the game, right? It's very difficult to sell travel if you can't also sell relief that a consumer can get testing. So one functional example of this is in Germany, many of our travel sellers and our agencies, particularly those with brick and mortar, they've partnered with the right laboratory companies to create testing facilities on the spot as a consumer is there interacting with the agents to understand where could they travel this summer. Can they travel to Greece? Can they travel to Mallorca? What have you? So that's the first example. Other examples we're seeing from airlines, and I believe United Airlines is one of the leading examples of this in the States, is being able to order testing through their applications and through their services, so that you can have quick delivery of self-diagnosed testing equipment that then you can use those results with certainty as part of your travel experience. So I think anything to alleviate the concerns of how do I travel and can I get tested, that our traveler sellers, whether they're the airlines or the agents, to be involved in is a upcoming big activity for them, certainly for the next 12 to 18 months.
In your opinion, how far along are we in this recovery on travel? Like, are we just scratching the surface? I'm sure Europe is different than the States. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think if we had a crystal ball, we would be betting men, right? It's a challenge to answer this. And unfortunately, as we've all seen, we're seeing ebbs and flows, right? So markets like India, I believe they're going backwards. So the closest thing we're monitoring, of course, and we're constantly in interaction with is what are the government bodies doing, and keeping close tabs towards those regulations that are the most important. You're seeing the emergence of travel bubbles, right? So if you look at if you look at Australia and New Zealand, I think they very comfortably have said, don't come visit us anytime soon, right? So Australia is fairly closed until mid-2022. However, people can freely travel from Australia to New Zealand and a pocket of islands within under this concept of travel bubbles. We're seeing that also emerge in Asia. So I think with the travel bubbles, we can have a confidence that travel is beginning to emerge, no matter what some restrictions may otherwise appear.
I see it now. I jump on a flight. I feel like it's back to the old days here in the States.
Oh, great.
I'm thinking, not all the time, but sometimes I jump on, it's a full flight. I did travel during COVID for some personal issues, and I remember it would be like 2 or 3 people on a flight. Now it's a full flight. I just came from South Florida to San Francisco. It was a full flight, and I'm thinking, wow, man, I was kind of liking it when the tickets were cheaper. Now the tickets are getting much more expensive. So I should have booked like my whole next year of travel in advance. So that's interesting. Well, tell me.
Yeah, I recently went to the States for what I call a vaxcation, right? So, right in early April, I think the governor first said, hey, all ages are eligible now. As you know, I used to be a New York resident, still carry that license, and I got the first flights I could. I flew through TAP, Portugal, which is obviously through Lisbon. And nonetheless, to your point, I mean, it was a really inexpensive fare. And normally you and I are kind of motivated to get a little more room, some cocktails in the travel experience. But I'm like, why would I pay for a premium experience then, knowing full well that the seats were pretty empty? And so, yes, I had a whole cabin to myself, not a full row, but a cabin, right? And then the liquor cabinet to myself.
That's cool. And I noticed you guys have a pretty cool app. What's the name of that app that you guys?
It's called Check My Trip. It's something I'm quite proud of. It was one of the reasons I was recruited to Amadeus. It's not something I continue to manage directly, but we've been able to collect millions of users using it. And it's actually won the best travel application now the last 3 years in a row. And what its essence is really to appreciate that your itinerary, particularly your itinerary of past, which you said from South Florida to San Francisco, pretty finite, pretty rigid. And more or less when delays occurred, it was because of rainstorms or the fog of California, what have you. But nowadays, right, particularly international travel, you're not so certain. And there's a lot of fluidity with cancellations, with plane size changes, what have you. So that dynamism is something, of course, we wish to, on behalf of our traveler sellers, update the consumers as frequently as we can, firstly. And secondly, to remind them again of those regulations we spoke of, because they could ever change when you have left your home market and then when you're looking to return. By the time of that return, there may be new introduction of the kind of COVID testing you need. And then lastly, to give comfort to the traveler all the while that there's ways for them to purchase touchless experience. Most formidably, can I be in an airport lounge, perhaps with social distancing as I have my family with me? Can I purchase a transfer from a airport to the hotel, particularly in destination I don't live and don't really understand the context of Uber and taxis and things like this? All of this is at your fingertips within Check My Trip. We work with a very strong network of partners to provide those services, even services to leapfrog sometimes the queues you might see when you arrive at the airport in terms of fast track and things that we take for granted as premium travelers of past.
Excellent. I'm definitely going to download Check My Trip. That sounds like a great tool to have when I'm restarting my travel plans, especially internationally with all the...
That'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, Michael, the interesting thing that, one of my most curious questions for you is, a guy like you, the godfather of mobile, builds this awesome map, starts to travel the world again. Where's the first stop in Michael Bale's destination list?
Upcoming, yeah. Well, I have two. I've had this developing bucket list. I'm involved a lot in managing teams in the Middle East, and quite frankly, I think outside of Dubai, I haven't had much experience there. And unfortunately, just before the pandemic, there was a really sexy campaign that was basically saying, "You're not going to believe where this is," and it was all kinds of rivers and forest and abilities to do whitewater rafting. And it was Saudi Arabia, right? So this area is maybe not middle of summer, but Saudi Arabia and Oman and some of these places that I've just neglected because I never appreciated they would have tourism on top of their list, have really been considerate to recognize that shortcoming and have actually flaunted what they have as natural resources to attract to consumers and tourists to come visit them. And then more pragmatically, because of course I'm not going to go there in the middle of summer, some of the folks we know in common who are living in Miami, we're trying to recruit them over to do some trips, some sailing trips to Greece. So I'll be in Greece most of August. Fingers crossed.
Where in
I think
Greece?
Mykonos, Paros, I guess. And then I'm open-minded to other places you probably know.
When we did our first like $50 or $60 million year, we took the company to Crete, almost 300 of us. Lovely little seaside town. Won't disappoint, and I think you'll find a lot of charm. So.
Awesome! I'll hit you up after for those lists.
Maybe, yes, for sure. Please. So, Michael, thank you for your time today.
Leo, it's a pleasure. Miss you very much. Thank you.
Face to face sooner than later.
Absolutely.
Maybe in Greece. Who knows?
Definitely. Take care, my friend.
Thanks, Leo. That was great. Thank you, Michael. You want to talk to them, go to the speaker green room below. Thank you, UAppy. And of course, can't forget Addictive. And last but certainly in no way least is AppsFlyer. Thank you very much. We're going to hear in a little bit from Craftsman Plus in just a second. But first, we have our last panel of the day. We got a couple more sessions. Don't you go anywhere, because this one's going to be great. We got another amazing moderator, Stephanie Lee. She's from Activision Blizzard. She's going to be talking with Alex Kozychenko from Hyperbeard. He's the CEO there. And also CK Wang. He's from QApps. So this is going to be a great session because we're going to talk all monetization. We're going to talk about how to maximize your revenue strategies. And what's great about this is that Alex and CK are indie publishers, but they have had some degree of success. So this way you can really learn some new techniques of what they're doing, how they're motivating, how they're utilizing a post-IDFA approach and what their results are. And what's great about them is that they both own their companies, so they can tell us everything that they're doing, and they will, as opposed to maybe some other larger companies might not exactly be able to reveal all sorts of things. But Alex and CK, they're gonna give us some great information here. So ask some questions in the Q&A. Let's get some chats rolling, and down below in the speaker green room in the main lobby, let's get some chats fire. Okay, yeah, showing my age on that one. Okay, so Stephanie, the amazing moderator, take it away.
Hey everyone, this is Stephanie Lee from Activision Blizzard. Today I'm honored to be here to be interviewing two of our panelists here. One is Chun Kai, or also known as CK. He is the co-founder and CEO of QApps, a mobile gaming studio with over 200 million downloads. Their most popular titles are Snake.io, Stacky Bird, and Pictoword. They make unified casual games by redesigning hyper-casual games with rich meta progression and live events. And here with me, we also have Alex, who is the CEO of Hyperbeard, the largest mobile game developer and publisher in Mexico with over 100 million downloads globally, and organic hits like Kleptocat, Suki Adventure, and Adorable Home. And for myself here, again, definitely, I'm currently the ad product lead at Activision Blizzard and managing titles like Call of Duty Mobile and some unannounced Blizzard titles as well. So, well, welcome you two today. Hopefully you have been healthy and sane in the past year or so. But just to start off with, since this 20-minute session is going to be around monetization, especially around ad-based monetization model, just to kick it off some context for those who might not be familiar in this space, but for mobile games that we all three of us are in general, in-app purchases is given. It's usually like the standard, the bread and butter for any of the mobile games out there. So knowing that like both of your studios are actually quite active in the advertising space, can you educate us a little bit on what's your team's thought process when it comes down to whether to integrate ads into your games? And I'm actually more interested personally to learn how you decide at what point in the game development cycle to integrate ads. CK, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. We think ads is really, really important. And I think that actually this is probably true for most developers. And the reason is because in-app purchase, typically even for, the best mid-core games, in-app purchases may be sort of a few percent of your users, maybe 3 to 5 if you're lucky. And for us, for example, it's probably more like 1 or 2% of our users are in-app purchase. And so you really need a large amount of DAUs and large amount of payers to be able to optimize anything on the in-app purchase side. And so that's something typically larger studios will be able to have. And so I'd say studios like our size, ads become a really big important factor. And the way we think about it is, really from day one, this game is for sure going to have ads. And inside ads, there's the 3 sort of big ad units. There's the banner ad, interstitial ads, and RV ads. And so we try to integrate all 3. I'd say RV is very easy because if you have currency or if you're giving rewards in the game, which a lot of games do, RV becomes a pretty easy integration. And so watch an RV, get this reward or get that coin. Interstitial ads is pretty easy as well. It's typically after each level. And so the trade-off there is, do you want to show the ad and potentially annoy the user, or when do we show it? And happy to dive there a little bit after sort of Alex shares his point of views as well. And then banner ads mostly depends on your UI UX. So in landscape games, it's a little bit harder. And then in portrait games, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, Alex.
Yeah, so I actually come from an ad background. So I was working for an ad network about 7 years ago or so. And then I was actually working in kind of a non-gaming space, more startup, just building apps. So, when it comes to games, part of the hardest thing to do, which kind of speaks to the metrics that CK just quoted, getting people to buy stuff. You're only looking at a very small fraction of your DAU that are actually spending. And so for me, ad integration was just kind of natural. And actually in our first kind of big game, which we launched in 2016, we kind of added in-app purchases into Kleptocats like a week or so before we actually launched the game, because the game just lent itself to much more of a kind of an ad experience. For whatever reason, we've tended to be to focus more on idle games, and in idle games, there are basically natural waiting moments or moments where the game effectively will kick you out or force you to slow down. And so those end up being just really, really good moments for rewarded video ads. A little bit less so for us when it comes to interstitial, because unlike level-based games where there's just a really obvious point to kind of put those in, for us, there really isn't never necessarily ever a breaking point. But we do try to look for little things here or there, usually kind of an extended meta stuff, kind of off side quests, mini games sort of thing, where we can kind of add them in, just add some incremental revenue. And we recently started experimenting with banner ads. But one of the interesting things we've seen, especially kind of in our idle game genre, is that adding in rewarded video ads, it actually is inherent in the kind of the core loop, where users will expect to wait at a certain point. If we don't make them wait, they'll actually churn because they're playing too quickly through the gameplay. And the ad not only provides a monetization point, but it also actually gets them to stick around longer, because it kind of gives them a break from the gameplay. And so for us, ads tend to be kind of front of mind when we're designing a game.
This is actually very interesting coming from a big publisher standpoint, and also the genre that we're for Call of Duty, for especially it's just a very different kind of experience. What we were trying to do inside the game is to provide different guns or skins and doubling weapon XP to help players progress. But then in Alex's situation, is actually sort of a way to keep the players around while they're waiting for a certain mission to get completed within the game. And that different perspective is actually very intriguing to me. So just as a follow-up question, since we talk about in-app purchases and banner ads and all these different ad placements that we have, so do you guys have any strategy or methodology behind it on how to optimize these different kind of experience? Especially, it's always a common myth for publishers when they're so hesitant about putting ads. Their biggest concern is, of course, around the whole IAP cannibalization, right? So for CK and I guess probably CK can start first. Like, what do you guys have any strategy or methodology that you use in order to optimize both IAP and also IAA in this case holistically?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the industry has changed a lot over the past couple years, and then especially in the past 3 or 4 years where hyper casual has really taken off. And so I think a lot of people are more used to seeing ads now than, let's say, even 4 or 5 years ago. And so we're not as concerned about sort of paying users quitting when they see an ad, but we do give them opportunity. So the example there is right after the first level, we'll sell them an in-app purchase, like a welcome pack, and that's a very common sort of in-app purchase, high conversion bundle discount on like a new user welcome pack. And so we'll show that to them. That also includes remove ads. And then if they buy that, then we got a paying user there.
And I'm assuming it's a subscription model for the removing ads.
Yeah, it could be. It could be either one-time or subscription. We've tried both. We're moving towards subscription. Partly the App Store fees are lower with subscription, but also the reoccurring revenue part is doing really well. And I think people are also getting more used to subscriptions. I think early days, there's maybe more of a stigma there, and now people are more used to with subscriptions and Battle Pass and all of that. So the industry is definitely changing, but we show ads right in our first session and typically after the first level or second level, depending on how good the in-app or how ready the game economy is for in-app purchase. And if it's ready, we'll show sort of the welcome pack after the first level. If they say no, then after the second level, we'll start showing ads. And so that's a way for us to optimize both sides, in-app purchase and in-app ads. In-app ads, I'd say another thing that's really important for us is what's called payback cycle. And what happens is when we do UA, let's say we buy a user for $1 CPI, you make it back over X number of sort of months and years. And for, let's say, like social casino, that's maybe like 2 or 3 years because it's like very, very competitive. In hyper casual, it's shorter. And the reason why it can be shorter is because of ads. And so if, let's say 2% of our users are paying users and 98% are not paying, then 98% you make zero, and you're sort of hoping for the 2% to stick around long enough and sort of whale hunting and you make back your money. And so the payback cycle part is really important for UA. So we want to make sure on the first day or the first 7 days, we make back a lot of our investment. And so because of that, we're also very aggressive in terms of showing ads early and showing ads within the first session. And the way we think about it is, hey, if we given them an opportunity to buy in-app purchase and they say no, and they still don't want to see ads, then we're kind of like at a loss there. They don't want to pay and they don't want to see ads. Well, kind of sorry, like we have to, keep the lights on. And so that's how we think about it. But for sure, I'd say the first thing is always the tutorial, getting the users hooked to, enjoying your game. And for us with Snake.io, like one or two levels, it's pretty clear what the game is about. But for some games, there might be like a longer tutorial, like let's say Pocket Family for us, it's a blast game, hybrid, sort of how home building, decoration, and blast game. So because the game is more complicated, there's sort of more steps in there before we show the welcome pack and then the ads. So it does differ per game, but yeah, first getting the user to love your game, and then showing them a heavily discounted bundle, and then if they say no, we start showing ads.
Just a quick follow-up question on that before I have Alex to share his experience is that do you guys do it differently when it comes down to the whole monetization strategy? It depends on what country they are from, as we know that T1 versus T2 and T3, they all have different purchasing behaviors and player behaviors. How do you segment that, I guess, in this case?
Yeah, we've never thought really deeply about this, but I think right now where the industry is at is they basically just sort of ignore like T2, T3, because the in-app purchase revenue there is kind of low, and they just say, hey, these are T1 pricing, and then of course they'll say no because it's just way too expensive in tier 3. And so I think the industry isn't really that focused on tier 2, tier 3, and you can sort of see this because only Google allows you to have different pricing for the same in-app purchase. Whereas like Apple, it's like if you have the same tier, it's the same tier global, and you're gonna have to use another in-app purchase bundle sort of ID to custom swap that based on the geo and all of that. And so we currently have thought about it, and then especially on the subscription side, we've thought about it more, but haven't seen sort of any big gains, because let's say sort of US versus India, your CPIs could easily be like a 30x difference and 50x difference, and if you further sort of lower the pricing for in-app purchase to like a tier 3 price, then you sort of have like $2, and what do you lower that to for a welcome bundle? So yeah, it's something we're thinking about, because actually we have a large team in the Philippines. So just like Alex was mentioning, they're in Mexico. We're actually the largest studio in the Philippines, and so we have 60 people there, 8 in Taiwan, and 15, 20 of us here in Seattle. And so yes, tier 3 is something where or sort of keeping our ears to the floor and seeing sort of what other people are doing and ready to jump on that if there's a big opportunity. Yeah.
Wonderful. What about you, Alex? What's the overall strategy when it comes down to balancing the whole monetization model within the game?
Yeah, so we generally don't think too much about cannibalizing our in-app purchase revenue. We kind of just think of everything as just boosting ARPDAU. And so what we've seen is we've been fairly good about boosting our IAA ad revenue over the years, because it requires, I think, a lot less necessarily game design and just more adding of ad placements, optimizing your ad stack, things that are relatively easy to do versus kind of developing a deeper meta into a game and boosting retention, which is kind of any game designer knows is the hardest thing to change in a game. And so because also most of our traffic is organic, like 99.9% of our traffic has been organic over the last 4 years. Our percentage of payers is relatively low in comparison to some of the other bigger companies or the companies that have gotten the same number of downloads, because they target users and they're really worried about, that user that they bought for $10, is that person going to get, they obviously aren't going to monetize with ads for $10. So they need that person to buy something, and we just don't really worry about that. In terms of how we think about geos, we tend to think about basically the world as 2 buckets, kind of east and west. And and obviously those are kind of catered to the 2 largest geos, which are the US and China. And we try to basically target each of those a little bit. But then we think everything kind of just funnels down. So if we do a good job of optimizing the game for kind of Eastern gameplay, so to speak, we expect to perform well in the other tier 1 Asia buckets, but also most of Southeast Asia. And that's kind of what we've seen. Games that cater well to the West, they tend to perform well in the US, some of Latin America, maybe Western Europe, and some of in the East are, the other side of the world. But in terms of kind of how we think about, in-app purchases versus ads in those geos, it's just a global view, because, whenever we launch a game, we're kind of, we're a little bit beholden to where we get featured, where we get word of mouth growth, which has been a big success factor for us. And that's never something that's fully in our control. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And then now, as you guys, I think you guys made a very strong point about how you guys actually do consider ads to be one of the key players when it comes down to revenue driving vehicle here. So with as everybody's talking about it with the whole iOS changes and whatnot, are you guys scared? It's okay to say yes. And if so, like what are some of the potential steps that you might be thinking of to be mitigating that revenue risk that you might be facing?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Yes, go on.
Sure, I can jump in. So for us, were we scared? A little bit. I think, you know, our general strategy was to take a step back and just wait and see what other people did, and I think we're frankly still kind of in that mode. We have seen a 30% hit to our eCPMs on iOS, which, you know, is worse than we would have wanted, but honestly is not as bad as I expected. And for us, you know, we're about 70% ad driven, so that's a fairly substantial amount of our revenue. So our overall shift may start shifting more towards Google Play because we were primarily iOS going into iOS 14. But in terms of are we going to change, you know, I don't think so. I think that the industry will adjust, the CPMs will start to come back up. I think ultimately, you know, developing for in-app purchase is somewhat of a luxury of your budget and time, because you really do have to develop a much deeper meta, really compelling content. And, you know, for, I mean, CK is probably in the same position. You know, when we're trying to get games out quickly at a budget, and, you know, trying to kind of test various things, you know, we're a little bit beholden to the types of revenue models that we can go for, and advertising is just a lot easier to get.
And CK?
Yeah, definitely. I'd echo what Alex was saying about 30%. So what we're seeing is RV and interstitials are down 30% in terms of CPMs, and then banner is down 50%. And so, so I mean, I guess the initial sort of scare with like Facebook and Google, them claiming 50%, I guess 30% is better. But I think right now we're spending a lot of time on the ATT pop-up itself and optimizing that. So yet another funnel. I mean, we used to sort of optimize sort of push notification, get as many people to say yes to push notification, and we still do that. And we have a lot of best practices around that. The ATT pop-up, Apple's being a little bit more
Look
sensitive.
at Alex, like, don't get us started here.
So they're a little bit more sensitive in what we show before and after, and no matter what the user does, you still have to show it. So it's kind of strange, but we're on our V7 with the ATT pop-up to see what Apple likes. But I think we should be able to get to a point where we're sort of like opt-in percentages we'd be happy with, and all of that. And so I'd say, you know, right now we're getting probably like sort of 20-30% like a lot of people, and then sort of getting to the 50% is where we'd be happy, and 70%. I told the team I'll buy them pizza for a week. And so so we're definitely doing a lot of sort of experimentation there and studies there. We run like playtest cloud sort of surveys, where they play the build and then they fill out the survey. UI UX feedback and all of that, and it's just, you know, one more funnel that we'll work on. And and actually I think, you know, the IDFA is actually probably going to hurt smaller developers. Like we have a team, like we can pay for, you know, playtest cloud and all of that, but you know, I just can't imagine like sort of starting a new studio right now, sort of by myself, like we did, you know, 10 years ago. It's just so much harder now because you have all of this that you have to sort of keep track of, and one more funnel to optimize. On our side, we're more ad driven, so more like 90%. So it's definitely something we're sort of keeping our ears to the floor again and experimenting and figuring out. But generally I'd say, you know, we're pretty good with like UI UX, and so I think we can we'll be able to figure this out probably faster than like a Zynga, where, you know, maybe getting a pop-up approved is like a week or two, and all of that, and we'd be able to execute quicker.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I know that we're almost at time. So one last question for the two of you is that, do you have one piece of advice that you can offer to the audience, given the fact that, like, with all these changes that's happening for the what's your thought of for the upcoming monetization strategy in 2021 and beyond? CK, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna cheat a little bit, but like I'll say, like always, make good content. So I don't know if this is a monetization advice, but make a game that is fun, that people want to play, and you'd be surprised. Like we launched the game earlier this year, and it didn't have any animation, and retention was pretty high. And so there is still an opportunity to make new games that people love, and a different game. And so always start there. Make a game. The retention. We follow a lot of benchmarks, and so retention benchmarks. 40, 20, 10, day 1, day 7, day 30. Focus on that, and if you hit that, I think you can figure out monetization later. So just focus on making good content and hit the 40, 20, 10 benchmark. And if you don't want to worry about monetization, there's a lot of partners out there for ad mediation, like Mopub, Max, Iron Source, and AdMob, that you could just add their mediation, talk to somebody there, and they would explain all the best practices. So make a good game.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a great piece of advice, and probably similar to something I was going to say, which is, you're going to get a ton of people out there saying, you need to follow this iOS 14 thing. It's going to be the apocalypse. You need to know all these sort of data points. But really, if you're a small developer or a single person, you really want to minimize the number of analytics you're looking at. Retention is probably the primary one. If you can get a game that keeps people around, then you can get people to monetize. It's really not a problem. Sure, getting people to monetize at $1 per user versus $10 a user is a big leap, but it's unlikely you're going to reach the latter. So everything you do in a game, whether it's building content, whether it's building a live ops system, all of that is tied into monetization. And so you really have to focus your efforts on stuff that you can control and not worry about the stuff that you can't control, which is a lot of the policy stuff happening at the platform level right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, CK and Alex, for your time. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Steph. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steph.
All right, thank you. That was awesome. We knew it was going to be. We can definitely continue the conversation with you in the speaker green room below. And let's talk some more monetization strategies. Coming up next, we have our last 2 sessions. They are a little bit more robust and a little bit more detailed. So we put these at the end, so this way we can have larger sessions at the end. And the next one coming up right now is from James Kuczynski. He's the creative director of brand and marketing from Duolingo. Great app there. I use it myself all the time. Annual subscriber, learning Portuguese. Thank you very much for creating a great app. And Alex Marutka, who owns and operates, he's the CEO of Craftsman Plus. So they're going to talk about how Duolingo adapted and scaled creatives to drive enhanced results. So let's get right to this awesome session. So Alex and James, this virtual stage is now yours.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Maruka, and I'm joined here by James Kuczynski. We're going to be talking about adapting and scaling your creative. We'll go into some quick backgrounds. I've been in the mobile ad space for close to a decade now. I got my start at a company called App11, working with a lot of different app marketers for growth marketing and app install campaigns. I started Craftsman Plus about 3.5 years ago to help brands really focus on the creative space and specifically app performance creative. James, if you want to give an introduction.
Yeah. Hey, Alex. Hey, everyone. I'm James. Spent a little over a decade in the creative field for some larger agencies such as BBDO, developing integrated digital campaigns, shifting over to VaynerMedia, where I spent a lot of time working on a few digital social campaigns and content, and recently shifted over to the brand side. So I spent the last year right now at Duolingo, heading up our global creative brand marketing. Very glad to be here with everyone talking about this topic. As brands grow and scale, it's only eventual that the content and needs will scale with you. So hoping to share some insights and challenges with you all today.
Absolutely. So we're going to go over 3 talking points and some of the challenges that most brands that we've seen at Craftsman Plus struggle with, as well as specifically Duolingo and how you guys have handled those challenges. So the first topic is going to be around customizing content globally. The second is going to be focusing on balancing on-brand creative and results, which is always a topic for performance marketers that also work in the brand space. And then how do you scale those creative efforts and do it cost effectively and quickly? So the first topic, challenges that Duolingo is seeing customizing content globally. I mean, James, Duolingo is a global brand. You have 40 different languages you can learn on the app. You're in dozens of different geos. So what are some of the challenges that you guys face when thinking about customizing content across the globe?
Yeah, there's honestly a ton. As the world's most popular way to learn a language, and global brand running creative in dozens of countries, as you said, it can really feel like we're always trying to put out fires without the proper tools or knowledge from that aspect. So, in our specific case, as a global brand, it's tough to not only have create custom content for your audiences and test, but then also have to localize that content per different languages. Then on top of that, also the fact that we also have to consider all the different nuances between the different types of languages for each market. So Spanish in Spain is going to be very different from the Spanish that we use in in Mexico or in LATAM. So yeah, definitely one of the main highlights there. I'd say a second is really thinking through, we're a product focused brand. So when we experiment and test all the time within our product, why shouldn't our creative or why shouldn't our content? So, if we set aside messaging, of course, which definitely should be localized, we also have a product where, our features and lessons, for language learning really vary per language and thus really are different per each market. And, when developing content such as video where we showcase our product, definitely there's a lot of challenges when it comes to being able to showcase our UI, right? We're creating versions on versions on versions, which definitely takes a lot of time.
Yep, and specifically about one of the challenges I know that we ran into early on. Do you mind speaking to just the if you take a translation from one language to another and what that can mean for your company when you're expanding globally?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to keep in mind that translating content doesn't translate, I guess, well all the time for different audiences. So making sure that you're not only translating, but you're transcreating and really finding messages that connect with those within that local audience. So it's important, to be mindful. I think a great example here was the word streak, right? It's a beloved gamified feature within our app, and that actually translates in Portuguese to the word offensive. So not a great thing to keep in mind when you're trying to call out important features that your learners or users will love. You really need to make sure you're doing the due diligence of researching that. It's really key.
Yeah. So when you're thinking through that, I know we've aligned on some of the solutions, but it'd be great to talk through this, and instead of SpongeBob trying to blow out flames with just his breath, coming to this nice rainbow animation on the creative solutions we've come up with.
Yeah, I think SpongeBob's saying imagination. There's these three solutions that we've really found. First, one of the most important ones is really the need to develop a localization process with your partners. That's one thing that we've partnered with your teams, Alex, on pretty well. There are localization agencies which can help support translating or transcreating of content. But for us, again, as a language learning company, we decided to really move forward with our own linguists that we do have internally, and really making sure that everything that we do translate or that we do transcreate really is up to quality. Again, because we are in the business of language learning. We did have a moment, I think, when I first started, we didn't have the process fully aligned yet, and we put some content out in German, which had one letter off, and that one letter can mean a big difference. So really making sure that your brand credibility can be at stake with just one mistake. So it's really important to make sure that you develop that process when it comes to scaling. But I think
with us working with your team on that process, I remember when we first started working together, initial, there wasn't really a structured process. So we kind of took bits and pieces of what we've learned at Craftsman Plus over the years from our localization process, then also kind of, it's not a one size fits all for our process is the localization process that every company should be using. We actually adapted that process to work with Duolingo because of all the nuances from the different languages, different features. Like you said, the Duolingo's challenges are pretty specific across the board for what type of content is shown within the app and within the ad creative across the globe.
Yeah, and I think our project managers and our internal sort of teams really found that process very collaborative with the team's producers as well. Yeah. I think the second and third points here in terms of solutions, it's really about the research process, and we found that it's good to base content creation and the way that you set up your content creation through your ability to research as a brand, and that really means kind of focusing on what we call a consumer to business approach, which ideally in best case scenario, would be first developing research about your learners or about your users per each market to better understand their thinking, their barriers, their motivation, and then really going into the messaging, the creation of that creative, so to speak, in a way that is more colloquial per each market and something that doesn't feel too jargony from that standpoint. I think the last point here is just making sure that if you have market leads in countries or partner agencies or vendors, just trust them. They'll know the markets the best, and have a better understanding of your audiences than you may have if you're part of a global team or sitting outside of that structure.
Yeah, what I found was really interesting from Duolingo's perspective was, you guys recently just started doing paid marketing, and there was, Duolingo grew organically to 500 million installs, which is a really impressive number. So tons of data points there, and you can really take a look at the consumers, what they're doing in the apps across the board in geos, and really, looking at Duolingo as just a big data company, and how do you process that data from consumers and then share those insights with your paid channels. So I thought that was really fun working with Duolingo when we were thinking through the creative approaches and strategies, that your team just has access to all that data and those 500 million organic install users and what their behaviors are within the app.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to the second point of the second challenge, which is balancing on brand and creative results. So, James, coming as a creative director, I'm sure there's tons of pressures being applied to your team from the marketing org, where performance marketers need content to drive and help keep performance high and basically hit their goals and KPIs and how they're being managed. But at the same time, your job as being the creative stakeholder, ensuring that brand needs are met and that the integrity of the brand is upheld. How do you what are the challenges you're seeing in balancing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, when it comes to creative and content, especially when you're then looking at the KPIs and the results that you do need to hit. What's really important for us, thankfully, part of our DNA as a brand is the importance of making sure that our brand identity and image is top quality. So when we're looking at scaling our beloved brand, everyone loves Duo. You see here crying. We usually share sad Duo when the work may fall short of being on brand. No one likes sad Duo. But I think to that point, figuring out the onboarding process and highlighting how you really want to showcase your brand guidelines with your partner vendors is really, really key to making sure that that relationship is set up for success. Alex, I think when we first started working with your teams, it was, I think, just having that document going through like the onboarding flow with your creative teams as well as our teams. It really just made sure that we're all set up for success with future projects.
I think that's often like overlooked because we can all get in the mindset of just performance first and just performance overall over everything else. And so when we're hiring and staffing, and I'm sure you're looking at this too from your creative team and how you guys hire internally, but looking at people that can understand the brand and have a conversation and use instead of just throwing bodies at problems, actually throwing brains at it to like really think. Like, you don't just need 100 designers building ads. You need someone thinking through like, how is this actually going to improve our brand overall, and thus helping specifically with performance marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, when it comes to, just complex projects that we all have, sometimes we're working with multiple partners, and when dealing, especially with global integrated campaigns, such as we work on, there's different multiple vendors, production companies, so many different stakeholders, and there's so many room for mistakes. And I think on any given project, we're most likely coordinating, even if it is internal, with at least like 2 or 3 other companies. So really figuring out who the person you can trust is for each different element, and working with your own internal project managers are pretty key here for us. Yeah, I definitely say, not to mention if you have a localization agency or then social agency to really support everything. Everyone really needs to be talking together, and making sure communication is key. Will really kind of set everyone up for success.
Yeah, especially when you're thinking of cross-channel and running across mobile and TV spots and all your different digital platforms and other vendors that you're working with, and keeping track of all the best practices for all these different platforms must also be like one of the more challenging parts.
Yeah, I love that point, because we've been talking about that a lot internally, right? The idea of not being sure if you should follow best practices as being a challenge. It's really interesting to think about, while everyone is sort of following best practices, that are set up by media or social, channels. Someone else is disrupting that, and they're the ones that are, garnering that attention with something new. So there's this challenge of kind of sticking to norms and looking at your own data to really make more informed decisions, and kind of trusting your gut for the creative risks. But to your point, don't always listen to best practices. It's probably the key there. I think it's really, especially from a creative standpoint, it's really on us to be able to push these. If we're not trying to push these, someone else will do that. I think a good example here was for best practices in social, right? Keep it short, keep it simple. Short form content that's quick. And what we realized was we actually tested a range of performance marketing content, spanning different lengths from 6s, we had 10s, 15s, 30s, and we found out, not over the course of just one sort of creative set, but over the course of about probably 6 months, the top performing asset was always 30 seconds. And when you listen to those the best in class examples, everyone's like 6 seconds, super quick, super short, to garner that attention. We actually found that people were just interested in the content that we were developing, and that actually led us to then test even longer form content with 45s. And that's something we're still waiting. Right now we're going through some tests, but yeah, very, very interesting. Ways to keep in mind, to just keep pushing. What are best practices, because if you break those, they may end up being more beneficial for you as a brand and content.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if everyone's going one way and you're going the other way and you're finding success, that's a true statement to the product that you're building and how you're resonating with audiences. And again, going to letting consumers kind of pull you into the best practice for your own product and app. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that as well, when we typically go down best practices, and seeing that longer form is what's resonating well. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I think too, and kind of speaking to that data point of we started the way that we started to see some of that data point come to life, and some of those results within our KPIs were really when it came down to the optimizing trials for registration. So as a freemium product, we found that it's best to really track early indicators of user quality. So instead of waiting on creative tests for 4 weeks like we used to, we adapting or optimizing for trials for Duolingo, we really needed to adapt and find other ways that we can quickly get more learnings back. And that's when we sort of pivoted a little bit more towards optimizing for registrations, which again really helped us gain some of those insights, which only kind of helped feed the machine, but then helped us move pretty quickly and develop more content. Yeah, I think the last point here of just mobile first creative, I think we follow a social mobile first approach, and then really adapt to additional broader audiences. So I think what you'll see on screen right now, you have two different ads. If you could tell which one was made for broadcast and which one was made for mobile, it's a trick question because they're both both made for mobile. We actually took a social ad and then a key visual that we were partnering with White & Kennedy on from a campaign standpoint. We saw that it was performing well as a static social post, and then we turned it into a short form video. Then turned it into we saw success there. Partnered with Alex, your team's here to then develop into a 30-second video to run in the performance base. And then we added voiceover after seeing that it worked really well for us. And then now we're actually testing it on broadcast TV in the DRTV space. So it's kind of this backwards approach almost, right? A lot of people are thinking about what's the film piece, then cutting it down into short form, snackable sort of bite-sized content within social. I think in this case, we're really looking at what performs well within specific audience segments and then really scaling that out up to like a larger media landscape.
That's been one thing I've really liked about working with your team has been the collaborative approach of, traditionally, if folks are looking for performance marketing and app install, White & Kennedy being more of a traditional kind of brand agency, but we were able to pull things from that brand and these, more branding awareness campaigns that, they were helping on a larger initiative, pull those into the performance, mindset and purview, and then actually adapt and recreate and take those assets and leverage them across all the different channels that we're doing in different media formats. And I think it's been great to, we still have the brand approach in there, and that's still a big focus, but taking it from let's see what performs best that's connecting with the audience, and then let's go share this message across broadcast and connected TV.
Yeah, it's again, back to an earlier point, it's good that we find a great way to collaborate between different vendors and different partners. It'll only help us again scale a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, so I think aligning on brand guidelines early on, assigning different stakeholders for different problems that you're trying to solve, and then collaborating across all the different teams, from vendors to internal teams to different initiatives, to make sure that we can be nimble. So if we see something working, we can replicate it across other channels. So you're still focusing on the brand and making sure brand needs are being met, but then you're taking the best elements from that and adapting them to performance, and vice versa. So the third thing we're going to talk about, one of the challenges is, so now we've figured out how to customize content. We have that process down. We're balancing brand and creative and actually mixing them both pretty seamlessly. And now, third challenge, how do you actually scale that? So you have all these different things moving. How do you take those creative efforts and what you're learning and what you've built and actually be able to produce and deliver the output that is required?
Yeah, I mean, the scaling question. I think there's a ton of challenges here, especially when it just comes to good creative. That it really depends on what your specific needs may be, and then also the resources at your disposal, whether that's internal or external. At Duolingo, we have a very nimble team, and while we do focus on craft, we do believe that the internal creatives should really be doing what they're excited to work on. Not on monotonous sort of tasks of, sizing, resizing, reformatting, shifting things here, or, a pixel pusher, as we would call, on the creative side. It's really hard to keep creatives and teams motivated when, if they feel their job is boring. And really thinking through that is one of the biggest ways to scale and kind of removing that barrier. It's definitely one, if not, I would say one of the biggest challenges.
Yep, and then just matching that with the amount of typically what we've seen folks do in the performance space is building a ton of different creative at scale, but then just the lack of quality that comes from that, from just basically requiring your team to push out more than they can handle and really push internal teams or vendors on delivering more capacity than they can. And then there's going to be a sacrifice, something's going to give, and typically it's the quality. And you can't sacrifice quality when you're a global brand like Duolingo. So some of the solutions that, what we found to help Duolingo, with the scaling problem is, kind of what James mentioned about having designers stay motivated. I mean, typically people are doing their best work when they are passionate and excited about what they're doing. So what we've built at Craftsman Plus is kind of a, balancing creative freedom and essentially just creativity from a art director, designer, whoever it is, coming up with concepts and ideas to push the brand forward, and technology to help empower these creative teams to deliver their ideas quicker on digital platforms. And we've done that through technology that will allow a designer to create their concept, but then when they're thinking about those tedious tasks, such as resizing or doing asset swaps, when it's a minute task of swapping one copy for another or background or a different image, allowing leaning into technology and letting all those asset swaps happen automatically to actually deliver the output that is in your creative mind, but allowing the technology to actually deliver and execute some of the monotonous work. Outside of that, it goes back to people and having that, a stakeholder process from a creative standpoint, a utilization stakeholder, making sure that all teams are communicating and aligned on the process to actually go through and deliver creative, and that's feedback rounds, that's concepting and deliverables. And when we think about this problem, like Facebook and Google has automated a lot of the media buying processes, but marketers still have jobs. It's not like their jobs just went away from this technology. What they've actually been able to do is marketers have now been able to be more proactive with how they've thought about impacting their businesses they work for, because they don't have to be button pushing as much in Facebook and Google as they used to. And a lot of this has been automated, so marketers can actually do more impactful things to the brand. And designers historically have not been able to make that jump. It's been, marketers need more creative because the machines are, burning through creative, saying, this one fails. Oh, we found a winner. These next 10 don't work. And trying to keep up with that machine, like fighting human versus machine, is, pretty difficult to win out. And so what we've done with technology, and I recommend most designers to lean into technology and to use it as a way to empower yourself to impact your business you work for more, so that you flip the script the same way marketers have with media buying. Designers, I believe, can impact the brands, the companies, the apps that they work for in a really powerful way if they free up some of that time and that creative freedom in their mind.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before in the past, but people are always worried when AI or tech kind of comes into play. They get a little scared, and I think it actually frees up bandwidth to innovate or to be a little bit more strategic. So yeah, definitely see that as
yeah, piggybacking off that point, I mean the three takeaways. I mean we'll jump into number two, what you just mentioned, but like using technology to empower creatives and embracing it so that it does help actually impact the business. At the end of the day, we all want to be valuable to the businesses we work for and impact them in meaningful ways, and technology is just a way to help enhance that. Partner and stakeholder process, that collaboration, it's not just internal teams, external teams, it's across everything. Your even your consumers that you're talking to. So aligning on whose responsibilities and who's taking ownership and who you can rely on, as you mentioned earlier, James, for what sort of things you rely on different vendors and partners for, internal teams for, is a key takeaway for how you can actually become not just adapting the creative, but then also scaling and seeing who's in charge of what part of the process. The last takeaway I would say that I want to leave you guys with is, people first. And James has mentioned this from like the consumer to business model of like listening to your customers. But I just think people first in general. Like the Duolingo team has a rock star internal team. It's been awesome working with them. They're collaborative, they're fun, they're real people. That's the type of culture we try to build at Craftsman Plus as well. And it's served us well from a culture perspective, but just thinking about your customers, not just who the customers and consumers are, but your internal team and your external vendors and partners you work with. I think just a people first mindset in general is the way to take on any problem, but especially when you have multiple different teams and vendors and goals from a creative standpoint, how you become most effective at adapting and scaling your creative?
Yeah, I would say people first approaches will always work out no matter what scenario you're sort of in. Yeah, and just thinking through how to make sure that you're finding the right partners and almost including them as your own internal teams. It just helps keep everyone motivated when everyone's having a good time working on great work that's really going to help impact your brand's mission.
Yeah, 100%. We just want to say thanks for the time, and feel free to ping us with any questions that you have. We'll be around.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the speaker green room below. Okay, coming up next is an app business expert. His name is Wilson Kriegel. He's taken so many companies from the startup stage through a successful exit, and he's going to give you a crash course on how to do that from starting up a company to exiting that company successfully. So I saw Wilson, I worked with him a few years ago for another event, and he did this presentation on fundraising strategies on how to raise different rounds and the strategy of when you do that and everything. And it was like widely considered from everyone who attended the event, one of the most intelligent and impressive presentations they've ever seen. So try to live up to that, Wilson, right? Not too much of a build-up. So with that, for this event, I said, Wilson, since you've done this so many different times for different companies, could you do a crash course for this event? And he said, sure, why not? So he put together this great presentation. It's about 22 to 3-ish minutes, but it's really informative. It's really awesome. So this is the type of stuff that Wilson uses with his advisory companies like he advises for. And after this, we'll bring back our special guest. We'll have a networking chat below, and then you can talk more with Wilson in the speaker green room below after his session. But right now, let's kick it on over to Wilson to get this crash course started, and let's learn how to take a company from startup to exit. Wilson, educate us all.
All right, so my name is Wilson Kriegel. I'm here to give you a crash course in starting up a company and working it up all the way through an exit. A quick brief about myself. Some of you may know me over the past 20 years in startups, and some of you may not, but I'm an immigrant. Originally moved here at 16. I've been lucky to be a part of founding and being hired to build 8 funded startups. I'm an active extreme sport athlete as well, and working right now on setting some world records. I've been a part of 5 exits out of 8 startups. Have had a failure, an IPO, 4 exits, and 2 operating company, one at fairly large scale called Pixart that has over 1 billion users now. I'm also an active advisor and coach, and of those 8 startups as well, 1 has failed, 3 have exited, and 4 have operating successfully. It's over $1 billion of shareholder value and over 1 billion obviously users in aggregate. I've got expertise, particularly in consumer software and gaming, digital media, and SaaS. And all that applies to the relevancy of this quick grind and pound startup outline. There is no magic wand. If I could sell you this for $1 million to make you millions and hundreds of millions, it would have been done before. Ultimately, this is an outline to teach you and help you in the benchmarks and parameters of how to look at the life cycle of building a company all the way through an exit. And what we'll go through is how do you scale, how do you start, how do you sell? And that includes what's the business and why, who are you doing it with, which is really critical to part of your success, how you're incorporated, how the legal structures and the cap table are set up for your benefit over time, which is how you'll make money, how will you grow once you have a product and a business, the risk reward and the yield of your time, of your energy, of the years that it takes to build a successful venture, and how do you exit, and what's the market reality around that versus all the hype that you may read on the news. Ultimately, and most critical is you have to create value. You and your co-founders, you as a single founder, have to create tangible value that somebody will want to pay a premium for. That value may be in the market that you're impacting. It may be to the end user or customer if you're a B2B or a B2C It may be in the unit economics of your business and how you've altered or changed the way something is made and sold. It may be in the cash flows of your business and the ability to generate profits. It may be in the scale of what you've accomplished, or in the value of the technology and its infrastructure. And of course, essential to achieving any of these will be the people and the intellectual capital that you're harnessing and growing over time. And as you accomplish all that, you'll ultimately very likely end up in a scenario where you're primarily very deep and have smaller scale, or you're very large and have slightly smaller value on a user basis and how you monetize. But whatever you do, whatever you set forth, you have to create value to find somebody to buy your company. And so what's your business? Why are you doing this? Starting a company, building a company is extremely difficult. It's very time consuming, it's very emotional, and it takes years and years to hopefully be a part of the 25% and not the 75% who fail. And so what's the problem that you're solving? What are you trying to accomplish? Right? How much value is that creating to that market or to these individual users? How big is that going to be? Like, how big of an impact are you having in these individuals' use cases that they're going to be wanting to adopt your product versus an established use case? What's going to be the adoption method? What platforms are you on? How difficult it is to adopt? How easy it is to onboard? Those are things that you'll be solving for. How do you scale your product? What's the distribution? What's the adoption? What's the capital needed? What markets are the international? And who's paying for all this? Is it your end user? Is it venture? Is it a business partner? Is it advertisers? You have to have an understanding even early on to how ultimately somebody will pay for the value of what you're creating. And can you create moat? Is there going to be tangible value over time that allows you to harness and maintain a competitive advantage and sustainable competitive value? Always make sure in this process that your business is easy to understand for whoever the end user is, whoever the investors are, whoever you're promoting it to, whoever you're hiring, because whatever complexity is in that execution, nobody wants to see or hear about the sausage making. They want to see about the potential outcome, the yield, and the value being created. So the pitch and the storyline has to be easy to understand regardless of the complexity of the business. And if it's too complicated to explain, it probably won't be executable. And accordingly, hiring investors and selling of that product will be very difficult. And whatever you're building, it has to scale. Unless it's a very small mom and pop business, or a very, very niche business with very, very high ARPU on a very small scale, businesses need to be able to scale, and you have to, preemptively think of that. And so to achieve all that, you most likely will need or want a co-founder to complement your skills. Co-founders are critical in various areas of how you will succeed in your venture. And obviously they will be challenging and also potentially undermining you into the fact that you're relying as well as depending and having to coexist with somebody else to achieve all these goals and these priorities. And so this is very hard to do from the ground up all the way to scaling. But you got to find people who are complementary to critical skills that you need to prove your thesis and to grow a business. And so if you are an engineer, you would most likely want a product person. If you're a product person, you most likely want an engineer. If you're a salesperson, you probably want a product person or an engineer. And so you have to have complementary skills that reflect the overall stack that you're building and the process of scaling and delivering your product, which is the front end and the back end of the funnel. And that will, be reflected in how ventures, react to your team and your team's skill set and their trust and belief that you have the, ability to actually deliver on your thesis and prove the thesis. And so you're looking for skills. You're going to look for funding. You're going to look for scaling. You're going to look for productivity, and you're going to look for emotional compatibility. These are the things that you essentially need. And your co-founder, you're going to look for trust and reliability, for common goals, alignment of risk and time. Obviously, again, this is very emotionally consuming. It's very time consuming, and both parties who will share a great stake in the company on an equity basis as well as on a potential outcome basis need to rely on that commonality of purpose. Complementary skills are key. There's no point in having two salesperson when there's nobody to build product or engineering. Having a common mindset around how you approach challenges, how you approach prioritization, how you communicate your level of maturity, commonalities and experiences, so you can share empathy and understanding of each other's process around growing through building a startup. Leadership quality is essential to hiring and to growing teams successfully as well. One of the best ways to make money, they always say in real estate, for example, you make money, when you buy. Quite frankly, a very underserved and understood part of building a startup and making money successfully over time is how you incorporate your company, the legal structures of it, and your cap table in particular. Over time, these things will have material impact and erode your ability to monetize your equity and the value of that equity. A lot of money is lost early on by founders not doing enough diligence and understanding the dynamics of how the setup of your entity will have material impact over time against variables that you do not control. You do not know 2 years from now or a year from now what the valuation will be, what the preference on the stack will be, what the investors will expect, the scale that you will be at, the challenges that you will meet, the number of employees you will have on your option plan, the size of your option plan. And so a lot of things that you have to do is ask and evaluate and set up environments that allow you to maintain benefits of the work that you're putting in, the value that you're creating while the company is growing. And so the entity type is capitalization, cap table, the founder shares rights that you have as founder, the employee agreements and the employment agreements, the option plan, all those in particular have critical impact on tax implications, relative to your vesting of your common shares, and your options, if you're accelerating them, early vesting them, if the company pays for that, if you're paying for it over time, and how your board is set up. Obviously, a lot of legal corporate decisions and your own employment at your company that you founded, happens at the board level. Do not rely on fancy VC-assigned law firms to have your back. These firms get paid with VC money, even though it's funneling through you. I would highly advise that you diligently spend the time meeting and talking to other founders who have successfully or unsuccessfully set companies up that allow them to benefit from that and that process, more than just lawyers. Ultimately, you want a law firm and you want lawyers and you want support that allows you to set up a system and an environment that speaks to what you're trying to achieve and your goals, protects you, as well as meets what the market bears and best practices. And there's a balance there, but you have to go do the diligence for that and put in the work. So now that you've passed all these, hopefully successfully so, you're going to want to try to start building a business. And the primary, point to that and goal around that is proving a thesis. You've got an idea, you've got a concept, you're trying to solve a problem, there's an opportunity around that, you believe in it, you have conviction in it, you're willing to do what it takes. Well, what do? Well, you need capital. How much and why? Do you not have engineering skill? Do you need to hire anybody, right? Do you need to test on a consumer basis? Do you need marketing skills? So what's your capital need? What is it used for, right? How is that going to create value in proving the thesis and ultimately getting you to the next stage of another round and hopefully bringing your product to market? What are your resources that are solving these problems that you're trying to prove? Right? Do you have the skill sets in-house, or do you need to bring on people and convince them to join you early on and take a risk with you to help prove that thesis, to hopefully capturing a huge market opportunity around your company? How much time do you need to prove that thesis? Is it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Usually within a year's 6 month or 12 month cycle time, you should be able to prove a thesis and a concept of a product that can grow into launching full-time into a market and raising a Series A, unless you're in very complex industries. You got to prioritize your cohorts. You can't just be everything for everybody and prove a thesis. So it's really critical to early on say, okay, these are potential market segments or demographics or use cases that we want to showcase with this early stage product. Otherwise, you will achieve very little over an extensive period of time. And you have to set KPIs and goals, even in the thesis mode, even in trying to prove the value of your concept. You have to have benchmarks and goals and priorities around these that you can measurably and tangibly say, hey, look what we saw in adoption and retention and time spent and usage, value created. You have to be able to speak to that to raise capital as well as to prove what you're learning and what is ultimately going to end up being your product. Time is money, resources is money. Those are really essential to understanding the reality of your company and your business. You have to be extremely creative and resourceful in problem solving. You have to learn to manage risk and be extremely comfortable with chaos and creating structure in chaos, which will never stop at a company. You have to be ruthless in prioritizing your goals and what resources are applying themselves to be successful, understanding the stages of your business and what the priorities accordingly are. You win long term by getting on base often. This is not a home run business. This is a business of getting on base and progression. Forward motion wins the game. You have to have the best people. So go out there and hire talent that complements you and allows you to achieve what you need, just like if you would if you were building a sports franchise and wanting to win championships. You got to make your team better. So you have to spend a lot of your time trying to understand how to make your team successful, right? The success of your team is your success. The failures of your team are your failures. From there, you're now at the next stage. You've proven your thesis, 6 to 12 months in. Where do you go from there? Now what, right? Well, congratulations for getting that far. Now the reality is you got to build a business and operate it. Now you're going to another stage of the life cycle of that company, and you need potentially more capital to scale various areas of the business and hiring. You're going to need talent, right? Are you hiring recruiters? Are you spending time doing it? But ultimately, you need to complement areas of your business, whether it's organizational, whether it's engineering, whether it's marketing, whether it's UX, UI, and product. But you need resources accordingly. You need capital. You need to find distribution and growth, right? The growth is going to be derived off the top of the funnel, retention, lifetime value, engagement metrics. But you need to find ways to show velocity of growth in areas of the business that clearly reflect tipping points in how you're impacting the market or your consumers. And accordingly, you need to find ways to scale the business. Now, is it new market entry? Is it complementary features? Is it international expansion? You need to understand your scaling trajectory and how you impact scale. And you need to grow your organization. It's HR, it's legal, it's finance. So it's not just product and UX and UI and engineering. You need to set up an environment for a system to function successfully. There's a lot of risk and reward around startups, right? And more often than none from the 24 companies I've been involved in directly or indirectly operationally, where I found failures to come from is most often the management and its founders. An ability to grow as an individual, an ability to raise money, an ability to hire the best talent, to adjust the priorities and solve and innovate around the frictions that you're encountering along the way, and your inability to lead. Without being a great leader, you cannot get people to do things that are challenging and solve important problems. And so there needs to be that relationship and that investment in yourself for growth. You need to understand your business cycles, the stages that you are in your life. Do you have that energy, that commitment, that time? Do you have newborns? Do you have health issues at home? Do you have capital, income issues? Those are all real, maybe not when you're in your early 20s, but as you get into your 30s and your 40s, these are variables you have to account for. Do you have it in you? These startups are a grueling process. If you just look at the news and TechCrunch of the world, it seems like it's all hunky-dory and everybody's just raising crazy amounts of money. The reality is every company is chaos. It's crazy inside all these companies. It's emotionally draining. It's extremely challenging. And you need extreme perseverance and commitment to go through these cycles. Is it worth your time, relative to the risk and the reward, in terms of ownership, in terms of what you're in it for, who you're doing it for, what does it mean to you? What's $10 million now, versus $50 million in 5 or 7 years? The average exit of a startup is around 7 to 8 years, right? Relative to the failure of the fact that you may have spent a decade ultimately achieving a great experience with $0 outcome, right? That's ultimately the use case and scenario for many entrepreneurs, right? You get low income and you try to create value through shareholders, right, and equity by creating value in the market. The reality is most of the time you will achieve neither. So assess that, what is time worth to you and what is this opportunity worth to you? I have debates and conversations, and this is really important, with a lot of young founders who have early stage exit opportunities. And so I talk to them and evaluate with them, what is it worth to you to have $10, $15 million in the bank after taxes today versus think that you may have and go for a larger opportunity with a higher risk of time and unknown variables to have $50 or $100 million in the bank. And remember, most billion-dollar companies, if you look at the cap tables, the founders never own more than 10 or 15% post multiple rounds of funding, and whose cap tables have either triggers or preference stacks or ratchets that ultimately pay out investors way before anybody else, and very few people make money beyond the founders. So think about that rationality of what's it worth to you to be a winner and getting $15 million 2 years in or a year into your company versus, the idea and the concept and the potential and the possibility that you're building something so astronomically impactful that your company is going to be a multi-billion-dollar company, and consequently, when you IPO or you exit through an M&A transaction at that scale, you may yield hundreds of millions of dollars of your own. So there's winning and losing dynamics there, that are very real. And I can assure you that most founders who I meet who sell early on never complain about selling, because somebody with $15 million in banks, mindset, future life experiences, risk, options is completely different from somebody who is, chasing, that same goal. And so, think of that as you think about the risk, reward, and yield. And the reality, again, is there's a 75% failure rate. And then within the success rate of the other 25%, the majority of starts, exit under $100 million. So are you really the 0.01% of, the 1% that becomes a Zuckerberg? And what are you willing to risk for that? So are you building a lifestyle business? Are you building a business that creates shareholder value? Are you in it, by principle, and you're impacting people's lives in a net positive way that is material, whether it's in health or in renewable and things that are tied to the earth, and there is no amount of money that can make you move away from that. Ultimately, there are various types of exits and deal structures in ways in which you will make money. Making money, as I just said, is very hard. There's a lot of variables along the way that will impact you materially in how your cap table will look and how you will ultimately see yield of value of your own equity. Again, look at the IPOs, look at the M&A deals and the details. You will see that very few people make money and make astronomical amounts of money. So with that in mind, what will impact, a deal and how you will ultimately see yield of all that work and that value creation. There's the cap tables, there's the investor rights, there's dilution along the way, there's the price of the sale, which you don't really control that well. There's a process around that. Who's controlling that process? Is it the boards, the investors, is it other founders? You're never fully in the control that you think that you are. Who's running that process? Are you dealing with bankers, lawyers? Are you yourself running a process? Those have material impact in the same things as you do when you fundraise or when you hire. All these things ultimately are added variables and tentacles that will, impact outcome. The liquidity events that you will find and see primarily along the way are IPOs and mergers and full-out sales of your company. You can do secondary. There's private equity firms, and there's divestitures if things aren't working. Deal structures will vary greatly, and depending on the market conditions and what's prime, you can have very heavy equity deals. You can have very heavy cash deals. You can have incentivized deals and earnouts, and all these often have beyond that a vesting schedule around your requirement to stay and continue creating value for the acquirer. Nobody wants to pay a premium for a company if the team walks out. So you can assess and assume that it will be a portion cash, a portion of equity, a portion earnout, and a portion vesting. And that's how the primary deal amounts are set up. In some cases, like in Instagram, the founders, who only sold for $1 billion, which was an astronomical number at that time, actually the majority of that was Facebook equity. And if you look at the Facebook shares since then, a decade later, the deal cost and value was significantly greater than $1 billion. It was 4 or 5 billion actually in market value today. So those will be intricate and complex. There's huge tax implications to all this along the way. And I would really urge anybody who sets up a company as well as starts looking at secondary investing and deals to be talking to tax lawyers around these dynamics, because you lose and make a lot of money just there. And you have to look at just the overall market opportunities that you are either winning or losing on. And so the reality is it's hard to make money. The market bears what it bears. The structures and conditions of your company are what they are in that moment of time. And if you drive with your ego, you'll probably miss out on a lot of opportunities. I've had a lot of founders in the gaming space, in the media space, who had their number versus what the market was willing to pay, and ultimately missed out on selling their companies for significantly more value then than they are today, which means that they themselves have lost out on tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And it happens a lot. Majority of companies sell that succeed, right? So that's 25% for under $100 million. And if you look at some data, you'll find that most companies have raised around $30 million and sell for an average of $150 million. So if you think about the cap table, your ownership, your dilution, the preferences, the taxes, it's easy math to understand whether or not you will or won't make a lot of money over that 8-year cycle average of building a company going through that process emotionally, everything else that you missed out in life, whether you were a good dad, a bad dad, a good husband, a bad husband, your health, and whether that outcome is as glamorous and glorious as you think it is. Ultimately, building company is a privilege. It's a huge opportunity. I'm very grateful for the fact that I've had the opportunity to do that. I would advise for all of you to to take that chance if you're young, and if you can manage the risk and manage your priorities well. And I wish you well.
There he is. So there's Paolo the Bulldog coming back to join us, right, buddy? So he's just coming to say goodbye to everybody, and he looks massive right here, doesn't he? So I'm going to put him down, and then I'm going to say goodbye and talk about some events that we have coming up. All right, thank you. So Paolo will be right there. I want to thank you all for being here, for coming, and for staying this long. Don't forget, Wilson Kriegel is in the speaker green room below. He's here to answer any of your questions or just talk with you. He's a great mind. He has a great mind, so pick it. It's free, and he's got some great ideas. Chat with him as much as you want. He's down below. We're going to leave the chats open for a while. So thank you to our amazing sponsors, Apps Flyer and Addictive. You're all applauding, I hope, while I'm saying these. And then UAppy. And thank you, Craftsman Plus, for joining us with Duolingo. So that was awesome. And don't forget, click the Black Girls code and make a donation down below. And if you're looking to hire people, then look to hire a diverse team with diversity.io. And that's pretty much it for now. I will talk in just a second about the events coming up, but of course, not only is Paolo a valuable team member, but I got to shout out our team. Olga Bazarova, you talk with her through emails. I'm sure each and every one of you has exchanged at least a couple emails with her. Kaylani Ampich-Kurse, she's also a global chairwoman of Speak Her. So if you're a female speaker and or you want to be a speaker, go to speakher.org and sign up. And then you'll be talking to Kaylani a lot. And then Scott McKay, he is our operations director. He's the man who makes us all organized. And then we have Sean and Eric. They are a development team that built this entire platform from scratch, like literally from scratch. This did not exist. This is not rented. This is all built by Sean and Eric. So thank you guys. Appreciate that. Lena cut up the motion graphics, and Daniel created the motion graphics. So the two of them work together on that stuff. Can't forget Chris, who does some of our static graphics. Yeah, and that's pretty much the core team right there. So thank you all for your contributions to App Growth Summit to make these events great, because during the whole pandemic, our brand awareness in the space has increased, and I think it's all because of the team effort. It's all because of the team and the platform that they built and the content that we're all putting together and out there, but it's really due to you. It's actually due to you. Because without you being here and coming to all of our events throughout the pandemic, then it'd be really sad. There'd be no one here to say hi to in the chats and enjoy this amazing platform that we built. So thank you all very much for just staying for all of the events, for participating in all of them. Some of you have spoken with us. Some of you have written articles for us. And by the way, if you ever want to write an article or speak at any of our events, go to our website and say the go out to the bottom and click Get Involved. Then let us know how, and we'll talk to you. And let's see. So now our next events. Next event coming up is a virtual one, App Growth Summit Latam. That's going to be virtual and en español. So if you speak Spanish, then you don't need subtitles. But if you don't, then we have subtitles for you. We'll have everything subtitled in English, and we'll even have a couple of English sessions as well. So this way, if you want to learn more about the LATAM market from people who actually work in LATAM, and then some people in America and Europe who also are either from Latin America or do business back and forth with Latin America, you're going to get multiple perspectives. of the market in Latin America. It's going to be great. So join us for that. That's July 14th. You can go to our website and sign up. And then the big return to in-person events. I cannot wait to see you all live. That's going to be in San Francisco on September 2nd. So join us in San Francisco. If you are fully vaccinated and you want to come down from Seattle or up from LA or over from New York or Austin or do whatever, just get there if you're fully vaccinated on September 2nd. Can't wait to see everyone live in person again. It's going to be so awesome. More live events. October 6th, we've got a App Growth Summit, AGS Mini Summit in New York City on October 6th. Then returning live once more to Austin. And App Growth Summit Austin will be on November 10th. So Austin's super fun city to visit. We're gonna have food trucks, beer, barbecue, things like that, all Austin type of things. And it's gonna be amazing and super fun, like it always is in Austin, right? Then let's see, then we have some virtual events. App Growth Summit Brazil is gonna be the 27th of October. That's gonna be in Portuguese. Maybe I'll have an English session or two, but mostly in Portuguese. That's Portuguese. And last event of the year, definitely not the least, last event of the year, December 2nd in Singapore. Probably not going to be able to do that one live, so that'll essentially be just like last year, App Growth Summit APAC on December 2nd. So I hope you're all talking to Wilson Kriegel right now down below in the speaker green room. We're going to leave the chats open so you can chat with Wilson or any of the other attendees that are here, sponsors, speakers, etc. And that's pretty much it from us. Got everything you need there. We'll see you either at App Growth Summit Latam next month, or hopefully, fingers crossed, App Growth Summit San Francisco live and alive in person on September 2nd. Until then, from Palu, the rest of my crew, and everybody, thank you very much for being here, and see you soon.
Oh,